You all here to the Expert Breeding Forum for 2024, which has been organised by Munster Bovine, Dairygold and ourselves in Teagasc, and we're delighted that you have made an effort to join us here today, because it's obviously a very tricky period on farms at the moment. So we've a range of speakers lined up for you, covering all aspects of breeding really, I suppose, and Joe is going to cover the nutrition piece. So we have Dennis and Fíona from the Practical Breeding Advice and the bull panels that are available through Munster this year. And after that, then we're going to look at the beef piece with Rose and Alan. And then Joe is going to cover I suppose, the tricky piece of nutrition in the current climate. And then at the very end, we're going to have a discussion forum as such with all speakers, and also Sean Kearney from Kilbehenny, who's a dairy farmer over there just on the county bounds between Cork and Limerick. But he's very much a Limerick man. So I won't delay. Sean is just going to say a few words then, and we'll hand over to Dennis to start at that stage. So over to you, Sean.
Okay, good morning ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Stuart. I'm delighted to welcome you all here today for the breeding event here in Corrin, and it is in conjunction with Dairygold, Teagasc and Munster Bovine. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers here today, and look, as Stuart outlined there, we're going through a difficult period of weather at the moment, and we appreciate everybody making the time and energy and effort to come here today. Like night follows day, this weather will ease, but as sure as anything, breeding season will be upon us in 4 or 5 weeks' time, and we'll need to be ready for that, and to make sure that we have the best possible lineup of bulls available to us, and Munster Bovine are there to support us in that. First of all, I would like to welcome Martin Kavanagh, Interim CEO. I would also like to say our first speakers to Dennis Howard and Fíona Dunne of Munster Bovine. They will be speaking on practical breeding advice and the bull panel for the season ahead. Next up then we will hear from Rose Goulding's NCBC and Alan Dillon from Teagasc, how to produce beef calves to a maximum value. We will also hear from Joe Patton Teagasc, who will cover pre-breeding nutrition, optimal management, dry matter intake advice. And after that then Stuart will facilitate an open discussion where we can have a questions and answer session, and we will also be joined by Sean Kearney, as Stuart said earlier on, a dairy farmer from Kilbehenny. Look, the topics have been discussed today do add value, and as I said earlier on, we are grateful for your presence here today. So look, I'll leave it at that. I would like to say I hope you get plenty out of the day today, and that we'll enjoy a cup of tea and a sandwich at the end of today's session. So welcome everybody, and thank you.
Okay, so thanks for that, Sean, and we'll kick straight off then with the practical breeding advice, which is going to be important in the next number of weeks.
I don't know how practical it is now, Stuart, but I'll do my best anyway. So I can press the computer here. So I'll crack on, and I suppose, look, the biggest development over the last few years as regards breeding has been sex semen and the increased usage over the last few years. So I suppose in Munster we've seen it, we saw it double for a good number of years, and last year then was the biggest jump. It increased by about 70%, and it looks like it's going to increase again this year, albeit not so much. So I suppose the fact that it's increasing tells its own story, that people are happy with it, and overall people are getting on well and just doing what it's supposed to do. But I suppose it is a different product, and it needs to be treated as such. And I suppose why is it different? And there's a couple of things. Number one, it's a lower concentration. So conventional straw, there's about 15 million cells in the straw. Sex semen, the norm, is about 2 million cells in the straw. All the Munster straws, there's actually 4 million cells. So look, we think that's the thing to do to try and maximise fertility. The lower viability then, so it doesn't last as long inside the cow. So the sexing process it's a tough process on the actual sperm cells. So what that means really is the cells, they don't last as long inside the cow, so we can't go as early. And then this process called capacitation, so semen has to go through that inside the cow to be able to fertilise the egg. It's conventional semen, that must happen in the cow, it takes about 10 hours. Sex semen, it's already after happening actually inside the lab. So what that means is we can actually use that to our advantage and go a bit later. So the little diagram there, you can see the 10 sperm cells. So they're the pink ones will produce a female calf. The blue fella there with the Y chromosome, he'll produce a male. So that's where the 90% purity comes from, that term 90% purity. So on average, you get 9 female calves out of 10 and one bull on average. So it is a different product, and I suppose to continue getting good results, you know, we need to treat it a bit differently. So I suppose what do we need to do to try and get the best results we can? So the first thing is actually selecting the animals for sex semen, and this is going to be trickier this year, obviously, with the way the spring has gone and cows in and all the rest of it. But the first thing anyway is cows, they need to be calved long enough, so 50 days plus calves. So it is really, for most herds, it is your February calvers is what you're looking at for sex semen, and maybe some early March calvers. So they need to be cycling regularly. Younger cows, generally younger cows are more fertile, so first to fourth lactation. Try to avoid the older cows. Body condition score, we know, and Joe's going to be talking about body condition and nutrition. Cows that have maintained good body condition score are more fertile, they have a better chance of going calf. Generally, they're, I suppose, those higher EBI cows with that higher fertility sub-index are better for holding on to their body condition. Then a healthy cow, a healthy uterus, so cows that had no problems during the spring, you know, retained afterbirths, milk fever, all those kind of problems. And then a healthy uterus, so there's no point putting a sex straw into a cow that has a chance of being anyway infected. And then Joe's will be covering the fully fed piece, so the nutrition coming up to breeding. The heifer selection then, the biggest thing with the heifers is they need to be above target weight. So that little table there on the right, our actual breeding fertility notes there are available down the back. So that table is inside it and a lot of other information. But what that's looking at is the target weight for breeding depending on the mature weight of the cow coming from the maintenance figure. So if you look at a maintenance figure at €10, which is around average, the mature weight target is around 590 kilos. So those heifers need to be 350 plus kilos at breeding. And really I would say maiden heifers that are under target weight should not get sex semen because they're going to have a lower chance of a pregnancy. So that's the selection piece. The semen handling, so either it or DIY. I suppose the hygiene of the thawing flasks, so make sure it is descaled. If you have an electronic flask, I think it's the job really, especially if you're going to using sex semen, but make sure it is clean, that it is descaled. Fresh water, cool boiled water every day. The temperature control then is the next thing, so make sure you have a thermometer and check it that it is 35 to 37 degrees for a minimum of 45 seconds, and then into a warm gun and into the cow within 5 minutes. So that's the golden rule for sex semen, to take all those precautions. Then the timing, and if we look at the graph up there, so we said that sex semen, it doesn't last as long as conventional semen. So you can go in with conventional semen right at the start of the standing heat, but with conventional semen you need to wait. So avoid the first 12 hours of the heat. That means not AIing any cows really that are freshly in heat or showing active signs of heat. Then we mentioned the capacitation, so that means that we actually can go a bit later than conventional semen. So 12 hours after the end of the standing heat, you're starting to get late with conventional semen. With sexed, you can actually go that bit later, which actually opens up the window. It opens up the window a little bit that we can use sex semen. So timing is very important, because if you're too early, it'll run out of steam, but you can go that bit later. And I suppose one way of overcoming the timing, especially in maiden heifers and even in small groups of cows, is actually to synchronise them. And it's probably becoming more popular, certainly in bunches of heifers, because it does simplify management, I suppose, and allow you to actually get an AI straw into your heifers. But I suppose a lot of the calls that will be coming into me coming up to the breeding season and during the breeding season is synchronisation gone wrong. Or something is after happening, so either a technician calling me, geez, I'm out here with a bunch of heifers and they do not feel right, something is after gone wrong, injection mixed up. So planning and communication is absolutely key to get the sync programs right. So there's three players involved, if you like: the technician, the vet, and yourselves, the farmer. So I suppose the first person to contact is your technician. So to book that date, make sure they're available on that date. If there's a bigger job, 2 technicians or 3 might be required. So to make sure you have your slot and that the semen is ordered. So that's number 1. Next person is your vet. Get onto your vet. So to organise, work back from the date you're going to be doing the AI, organise the animals to be synchronised, get them to write out the programme so that there's absolute clarity that there's no injection going to be mixed up. And then I suppose yourselves then to be organised on the day. So make sure you get all your injections right, follow it to the letter of the law, and then organisation and help on the day. And I suppose one simple thing to do, we'll just say you're a bunch of 20 heifers, if they're getting 3 different bulls, if you could have the heifers divided by the bull they're getting, it makes a huge difference. Because then the technician, they're just looking for the one straw, they're not trying to figure out which straw is going to which heifer, and it just streamlines the thing, and anything you can do to streamline it will give a better chance of getting good results. So look, the maiden heifers, there is advantages. Obviously the genetics, you're getting your breeding replacements off your highest genetic merit animals. The ease of calving, especially even with sex semen, builds on that again if there's heifer calves being born. Obviously they're going to calve early, you're going to have a nice compact group of heifers calved early. The work is planned versus reactive, call it that, so you just follow the programme instead of heat detecting every day. And I think one big advantage, some people see it as a disadvantage, the repeats, but I think it's actually an advantage because whatever is going to repeat is going to repeat within a few days, so 18 to 24 days. So it is well worth putting on the scratch cards, putting on your crayon, use the 2 of them, and actually AIing those repeats. So it gives you the opportunity to get 2 AI straws into a heifer within 24 days. And again, your easy calving, so even if it is an Angus they're getting, you're guaranteed an easy calving if the right Angus goes on. And then your bull, whatever is going to repeat after that, the second repeat, 36 to 48 days, and they'll have got 3 opportunities then, so that bull then is actually freed up to come home to the cows, so you're even a bit more efficient with your use of the stock bull. Cows then, something we promote is, apart from the pre-breeding piece now, put 3 weeks in, 6 weeks in, and even if you're still AIing, 9 weeks in. So put a big effort in for the first 3 weeks, submit as many cows as you can, so good job with the heat detection. But whatever is not submitted then after the 3 weeks, the 24 days, calve 35 days, call your vet, get them examined, and put them on a sync program, and they're guaranteed to be bred 10 days later. So you can do it again 3 weeks later, and what you're actually doing, you're catching the non-cyclers, you're catching the cows that you missed, because we all miss cows, we'll just, whether they have silent heats or quiet heats, and you're actually bringing your submission rate up to 100% every 3 weeks, which is going to drive your 6-week calving rate. So my second last slide then, I suppose we're heading for the 1st of April. So the actions for April, or actions for early April. And one big one, and if you take one thing away from me, I would say, is to try and go after cows that might have an infection now. There's no point in waiting till the middle of May to find out. The technician takes out the gun and the cow is dirty. You're too late then. So to try and identify these cows now. And I suppose there's 2 approaches. If you have good records, if you had a fairly good spring, and you've good records, so those usual suspects again, the cows that had a milk fever, or retained after birth, the hard calving, twins, all those ladies, any cow that you spotted in the cubicles with a bit of a discharge. So if you have good records, actually pull out those cows, get them examined, either scanned or metric checked. That little picture over there on the right is the metric check device. Very useful way of identifying dirty cows. So it is a little rubber cup and a stainless steel rod. And you actually take a sample in close to the cervix, and you'll identify if there's a discharge. So to get those cows identified and treated, and look, it's hard to beat the Metricure. It is licensed, it's effective, but it needs to be put in the same as AI technique at that stage. So into the uterus through the cervix. I suppose if your records aren't as good then, and you've seen a nice bit of discharge and things around the cubicles, look, the blanket approach, actually maybe get the whole herd scanned or metric checked and find those ladies and treat them. So the second action then for early April is and I know it's hard to be talking about this now, is pre-breeding heat detection. But look, certainly if the cows are going through the crush, like in the previous slide, it's a good opportunity to actually get out the clippers, clip the rumps. So that's one job done before the breeding season, so that you'll have a nice clean rump tail head there to put on the tail paint. Tail paint them up, maybe change it again or top it up in a week or 1 or 2 times coming up to the breeding season. And really what you want is, even if you don't record the heats, whatever is left with tail paint at the end of the 24 days, they're the ladies that haven't come bulling, that haven't cycled. So they're a group again to maybe to go after, to get them treated before the breeding season, put them on one of those sync programs again, and actually get them bred early in the breeding season. So that's it for me. So and the picture on the right is our breeding fertility notes. So they're available down the back, and a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is inside in them. And Farm Ops is on the left then, so that's our app. There's a very good breeding module in Farm Ops, so any of you that aren't on Farm Ops, maybe have a crack off it for the breeding season. So I suppose what's different is the real-time analysis. It does analysis every night and presents you with the fresh data every day that tries to keep you on track through the breeding season. So that's it for me, Stuart.
Okay, Dennis. So just, I suppose, quick questions. I'll just bounce 1 or 2 questions off you, and if there's any important questions. To that early born group of heifers, how important is that in terms of hitting the targets for breeding the following year, in your opinion?
Oh sure, it follows on. It follows on, Stuart, doesn't it? If you can have a nice compact bunch of heifers born, they're easier managed. They're going to be weaned together, managed together, much easier, hit their target weights for the following breeding season. So if you can get it right once, it's much easier to repeat and get it right after that again.
Okay,
yeah.
And then you kind of touched on it as well, but so there's farmers in the audience that have sex semen ordered or maybe already have it on their farms already for their heifers. Most people are probably going to work with the heifers initially if they haven't tried it on cows before, so they're going to do the sync program that you're talking about there. What's the scenario when we get this bad day on the 1st of May, the 5th of May, whenever the techs are there to do the AI? We've ploughed the field the night before with all these cows or all these heifers bulling. Are we still going to go sex there now because we've committed to it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I remember, I suppose we had a great February last year. Not really the difference between this year and last year was the great February. But I remember talking about this last year, is the amount of sex semen that was gone out, and the weather was so bad, and is it going to be a disaster? And sure, it wasn't. It wasn't a disaster. There was very few stories where it got on bad. So I suppose specifically your question, I mean, if the heifers are up to target weight and you've done everything right to that point, a bad day or a bad night, it shouldn't, it's going to have some impact, but it shouldn't have a catastrophic impact as long as they're on the right trajectory on the way up to it.
Okay. Yeah. Does anyone want to ask Dennis a question there? Yeah, Pat. Shane, just there. Yeah, just there.
Just in relation to sex semen there, a lot of farmers use sex semen on fixed time day with heifers and very, very disappointing results. There's one guy, he did 10 cows, he got 1, and he's not quite sure what went wrong. And as a follow-on to that, in relation to sex semen, will the technicians have sex semen available in the pot as and when during the breeding season, or must it be pre-ordered?
So the second question first, anyway, at the moment, anyway, Pat, no, it must be pre-ordered.
Can I just on that, that's no good then to the average farmer who wants to use a bit of sex semen on a handful of good cows, because your window for the sex semen is so finite that if it's not in the pot, whether you have a pre-order or not, it's not going to be used. So I think you need to address that. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll take that feedback, and it does come up in fairness, but I suppose it is an expensive product. So at the moment, it's ordered. It's bought and it's for that farmer, Yeah.
Okay, and the first question then, in terms of the performance in relation to the sync programs, comes up regularly, then that question.
Yeah. And look, I get it too, obviously. I suppose the only thing I would say is the big data, and even the work that ICBF did last year would suggest the overall performance is good, but I accept that there is situations where very disappointing results and with sync programs. So look, I'd be happy to review it individually with anyone that wants to talk to me, and I suppose, look, there's a lot of links in the chain, and if any one of those links is broken, you can get a very bad result, whether it is the sink. And look, even ourselves, the AI, like, it's all on the table to look at, but I'd be happy to look at it for anyone individually.
Yeah, and I suppose just to reiterate that, then, like, Stephen's work from the trials that he has done would have shown that there can be huge variation, and that the conventional AI can actually be very, very good in herds, but the sex can be very poor. And like you said, there's so many pieces have to fall into place that if any one of them falls out of place, it can impact on the performance.
And if the conventional is very good, I suppose the two things that are in the spotlight then are actually the semen handling and the AI process and the timing. So if the conventional is going well and the sex is going bad, you'd have to question why.
Okay, we'll just take one question from you, John.
Just in relation to cows that are suitable for the sex semen, I was at a farm.
Just 1 second, John, until we get to
the group was saying that they would advise not use it on first calves because they're under more pressure than your second or third calves.
Yeah, I'd say, John, herd by herd, that you'll see a difference in herds. In some herds, the first calvers, they look very good. Their coats are good, their body condition score is good. So if they're going well, absolutely. But certainly, if they're struggling for whatever reason, if they haven't coated off, if they're looking a bit scruffy, those heifers or those first lactations, I would agree. I would avoid them. Yeah.
But again, John, the research that Stephen has shown hasn't shown any impact in the first calvers. They're actually the highest conception rate to the sixth. So, as long
as they meet all the criteria, there's the same criteria applied to them: the body condition score, the calf long enough. If they hit the criteria, I wouldn't be worried about using them.
Yeah. Okay, so just in the interest of time, we'll keep moving. So thanks, Dennis, and you'll be back up afterwards if anyone has any further questions. So our next Dunne, and Fíona's the Dairy and Beef Programme Manager for Munster Bovine, so she's going to talk to us about the bull panels that are available this year. Okay, so thanks, Fíona.
Hi everyone, I have to adjust this a fair bit down. So my name's Fíona Dunne, I'm the Dairy and Beef Programme Manager here in Munster, and what I'm just going to go through is a few tips, I suppose, for the season ahead, and a guide as to how to navigate our catalogues to select the best sires for yourselves in your own system. So first of all, starting off, just find out your baseline. It's always good to know where you stand at the start of the season, what areas you need to improve in. Then you'll find out your main focus for the breeding season ahead. You'll be able to select panels then to suit your system, and you'll be able to pick a team then from our panel that ticks all the boxes for you for the season ahead. Okay, so starting off, find out your baseline. The ICBF EBI report is a really good tool just for you to get a gauge as to where your genetics are at each of your herd levels, and to get an overview of the females in your herd. So I just have two boxes highlighted there. The top box, across the board, it gives you the average of your entire herd. Okay, so it's always really important. Here, just when you're looking at your own EBI report, you'll have the milk production over here, and then you'll have the various different traits. Okay, so they start off at the milk production. You'll have your fat, your protein percent, your fat and protein kgs. You'll get an idea of your average milk as well and the genetics for your herd. You'll have your fertility sub-index, the likes of your maintenance sub-index, your health sub-index, and your EBI. Okay, so you can see where you might need to improve on. Then this will be broken down into each lactation as well. And then at the bottom there, you have your dairy young stock. So you'll have your 22 calves and your 23 calves. And these are always good to have a look at, because even though the average is great, that takes into account your older cows. But your young cows, they're the kind of, ideally they be the highest genetic females in your herd. So you kind of want to keep using sires that will improve their genetics each time. Okay, so, and then as well, when you're looking at it, you can see the trend of what decisions you've made all along, from your 5th lactation to your 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and even your young stock there, and see what direction you're going. So then you can decide, once you know where you stand, you can decide what your main focus is then for the season. So first of all, I think sometimes it's overlooked, the maintenance sub-index. So what size of females do you want, okay? So there's only one trait in the maintenance sub-index, and that's live weight. So the maintenance sub-index is a really good sub-index to kind of gauge where you are and what size females and what size sires you're actually selecting for your females. So a 0 maintenance is about 641 kgs. You can go down to, say, an 8 maintenance is about 580. Sorry, an 8 maintenance is about 600 kgs. Then 18 maintenance is about 550, okay? So you'll get a gauge as to what size females you want, what sires you want to pick to breed the size of females then you want for your herd. Then you'll also look at the different traits, so your solids, your milk solids, that's your fat and protein added together, your percentages, your milk volume, are you going down in health traits? So the health trait sub-index includes your TB, lameness, mastitis and somatic cell count, your fertility and your EBI, okay? So next step then will be selecting the panels to suit your system. So we have our spring dairy catalogue, so that was based on the January proof from ICBF, and they'll all be available outside if you want to check them out, and a few of the sales guys are here as well, so you can contact them to get a gauge as to where you fit within them. And we have a new website as well, so that's just a picture of the home page on the right hand side, and if you scroll down we have all the panels within the website as well. So this is just a kind of a screenshot of what you'd see in our catalogue. So we've selected these target 500 plus kgs of milk solids. They kind of suit the majority of people, but we have based them and split them up based on the maintenance sub-index. So once you have a gauge as to what size of a female, what size of herd you want, you can either go for the high to medium live weight panel. So these are breeding heavier animals. They range from, and we have the panels sorted by maintenance as well. So it goes from your lowest maintenance, which is your higher live weight animals. So that's your 640 kgs it starts off at, and it goes down to, this first panel will go down to about a maintenance sub-index of 12, which is about your 580 kg mark, okay? And then within that, this is the panel average, there's about 30 bulls in there. So within the panel, you pick your team then of however many bulls that you need for your system. So on average, AI sires, they're all going to have a really good high EBI. But what you want to look at is, I suppose, maintenance, what size of females you want to breed for, your solids, so your fat and protein kgs, your percentages, what kind of volume do you want to stay at. So a milk kg, a genetic value of 0 will still, we'd be expecting those females to milk around 6,500 kgs of milk in their third lactation. So that's as a mature dam. So that milk kg can be gauged up from there. So that average team is 84 kgs for milk, so we'd be expecting them to do about 6'6". Of course that depends on the female. We're only looking at the sire here, but it will depend on the female that you're using as well. So this panel here is a maintenance sub-index of 8, so that's about your 600 kgs panel, or live weight. Then we have the same panel, so we're still focusing very much so on milk solids, getting the production up, whilst maintaining still your high EBI, high fertility, high health, so all the other traits are still looked after. But in this panel then we want to breed kind of more of a medium to low live weight. So the maintenance sub-index in this panel ranges from 12 down to 26. So the 12 would equate to about a 580 kg live weight, and your 26 is about 520 kgs. So you can gauge then within your own system where you need to be looking for your sires. Again, all the sub-indexes are high. We want to maintain production and maintain the rest of the traits without compromising anything, but we also want to drive on milk solids, drive on percentages, and then they range as well with milk volume depending on what your own system requires. So then if you really want to focus on, say, high percentages, getting those percentages up, we have a high percentages from black and white sires. So these then, they have on average 0.37% fat, 0.23% protein, and we still have 28 kgs of milk solids. So you're still increasing your kgs of solids, but while driving on the percentages just that bit more. And I won't go through the rest of the panels, but we have panels that kind of fit different systems depending on what your requirements are. So if you're looking for a daughter-proven panel, these are sires that have females that have at least completed 1 lactation. And then we have our outcross panels. So a lot of the time, sometimes people will raise the issue that they've used a lot of pivotal in their herd. So this outcross panel wouldn't include any pivotal in sire lines, doesn't include any Seville, Albert, LW or LHZ. So we looked at the frequency of the sire lines across the population, and these were the higher frequency sires. So any of those sires that appear in the outcross panel, you shouldn't have any issue with the likes of inbreeding checks. Then your easy calving panel, so these are all proven easy calving suitable for heifers. Your pedigree production and confirmation panel then towards the right, they are your high type, really high volume kind of sires. So if you want to drive on volume and bring in a bit of type as well into your herd, then that's the panel for you. The strength panel then, we've these picked specifically to breed more strength into your herd. These are lower stature sires. They're wider on the chest, they're less angular as well, so rounder, more robust progeny from these sires. Then we have a red and white panel, so this is red and white Holsteins. So the bulls are either red and white carriers, or they actually have the red and white coat themselves. So if you make those with another red and white dam, you're guaranteed a red and white calf. And then we have our health panel. So these are all bulls that are exceptional for health subindex. So they're really high on health subindex. And then those 4 traits that I mentioned earlier, your TB, lameness, somatic cell count, and mastitis, they're really low for those. So you want a sire that's high for the health subindex, but low values for each of those individual traits, because that's the prevalence of the trait within the herd. So a lower prevalence is going to be better. So that's just a quick kind of overview of our different panels, how you can kind of fit yourself into the panels that we have in our catalogues. But we'll be here all day, so we're more than happy to go through any of the panels for your own system. If you've any questions, or bring up even your EBI report, and we can go through it to select the sires then for your system. And if you want any more information on the individual bulls and our dairy beef bulls, we have that up on all of our social media. So the likes of YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, we have them there, and LinkedIn. So you can check out any of the panel for the individual bull information. So that's me done.
Okay, thank you, Fíona. So, quick question: do you have to fit into a particular panel, or can you have the a la carte option as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like the whole reason for the panels is to try and make it as simple as possible, so that you could say, want a 600 kg sire with an average milk volume, high milk solids. Go to your target 500, but those sires will be across the other panels as well, so you can pick from anything, just once it suits your system.
Okay, very good. Anyone any quick questions on the panels? No, if we're okay, so we'll move into the next session. So we have 2 speakers that are very well placed to discuss this topic. So Rose is obviously working with NCBC and is looking after the selection of the beef bulls, I suppose, Rose, which has become fairly challenging, I suppose, maybe in the last couple of years to try and deliver what is required from the Dairy Beef Index. And then Alan Dillon is the Dairy Beef 500 manager for Teagasc, and Alan's going to talk about it from the farmer's perspective, with the group of farmers that he's working with, about the type of calves that they're looking for. So I'll hand over to you, Rose. Thanks.
Great, thanks Stuart. Hi, good morning. So what I'll talk about this morning is how to breed high value beef calves without compromising on the dairy enterprise. And that's the secret. So we need to do both. And a couple of points to remember. The first thing to remember is the maiden heifers on your farm, they should be the highest genetic merit females you have. So use high EBI sires on those. It is wasteful to use Angus on those females. So use high EBI sires on your maiden heifers. After that, for your cows, do a bit of planning before the breeding season. do a calculation to figure out how many replacements do you need. Then depending on whether you're using sex semen or conventional semen or a combination of both, you'll be able to pull out all the cows then that are available for beef. And we have a bit of an opportunity here now that we didn't have a number of years ago, because there's less of a requirement for replacements. So we can use beef sires from the very start of the season on the cows that we don't want replacements from. Okay, so the first job to do is identify all the cows you have in the herd that you don't want replacements from. They will get beef sires. Second job at hand then is divide those according to parity. Second calvers, cows and mature cows. And to really maximise the quality of the calves you get from the dairy herd. As your cows get older, they get stronger, so they have a greater calving ability. And as their calving ability is improving as they get older, you can use sires higher in beef sub-index. So basically higher quality sires, more carcass, more sub-index, more beef sub-index, and they'll produce the high CBV calves. So identify the cows you're going to put your beef on, divide them up into at least 2 groups, but better 3 groups, second calvers, cows and mature cows. And use the higher quality bulls as cows get older and as their calving ability improves. The other thing to consider then is, think about the breeding season, divide it in 2 parts, first 6 weeks, second 6 weeks. In the first 6 weeks, you don't really need to worry about gestation length, so you can use bulls there that are at 0 or a slight positive on gestation, and you can be a little bit less conservative on calving, because those cows, they won't have high body condition when they're calving down. In the second 6 weeks then, move into your really short gestation sires, and we've super sires there with high beef sub-index, very negative in gestation, so they'll knock 2, 3 and 4 days off gestation, and get a bit more conservative in calving on the second 6 weeks than you would the first 6 weeks. And the other cows then to watch are your very old cows, because those cows, they just don't have the physical strength as the younger cows for calving, and they're also more prone to milk fever. So watch the older cows as well. So you've your cows pulled out, you've divided them into groups. So the next job now is to select your beef sires. And a couple of rules of thumb here. Figure out the calving difficulty first, because that's one thing we don't want, is any calving difficulty on the farm. And our whole beef and dairy programme is about reducing the calving difficulty on the farm. Okay, so pull out the bulls with the calving difficulty that you're comfortable with on the different parity of cows. And the best way of doing that is, you all know the bulls you used last year. You know how you got on with them. You were happy with some of them, maybe some of them not so happy. So if you used bulls, for example, with 4% calving difficulty, you got on fine, happy days, you can more or less stay at that level on your cows. If you found that was a bit too much for you, pull back a bit. If you had absolutely, no issues whatsoever, and you thought the calves were a bit small for you, come up a notch. So it's all about benchmarking the bulls that you've used last year, and then when you're picking out your new team of beef bulls for this year, just compare the calving difficulties, and that'll give you a good handle then on how to select your team of bulls. Once the calving is sorted then, pick the sires that have the highest beef sub-index. Okay, because we all want to breed calves now with a high CBV, a high commercial beef value, and it's the beef sub-index that translates into the commercial beef value. And we've put a minimum there of a beef sub-index of €90, but that really is a minimum. You really wouldn't want to be going below that if you want high value calves. So minimum of €90 beef sub-index, and also watch the carcass weight. So we've put a minimum there of 8 kilos. And that's pretty much where our bulls for maiden heifers are. Once you get into the bulls for cows, you'll get higher beef sub-index and higher carcass weight. Now coming into our panels of bulls, and this is the way the panels of bulls are shown on the Munster Bovine catalogues. So you have the GBI, which is made up of the calving and the beef sub-index. You have the beef sub-index there, you have the gestation length, you have the carcass weight and conformation, and on the far right then is the advice on what type of female this bull is useful for. So bulls for maiden heifers, couple of rules of thumb: use really reliable sires, ideally over 90% reliability. ICBF give a risk on all beef sires. They have a low risk, a medium risk and a high risk. So use sires with low risk, and there are the sires with very high reliability, so over 90% reliability. And you still have good quality calves from these bulls, because our beef sub-index there is, the lowest bull there is 96, so we are above 90 even on the bulls from maiden heifers. Moving on then to bulls and cows, and what I've done here is just pulled out a selection of bulls from a couple of breeds. We all have breed preferences, so once you've pulled out what breed you want to work with, have a look at the bulls available, have a look at the calving difficulties, and then pull out the bulls with the highest beef sub-index. If you're early on in the season, you don't really have to worry too much about gestation. If you're later on in the season, start to look at the short gestation bulls. And just to pull out an example there, the bull there that's photographed, Lord Horatio, he's minus about 3 days in gestation. He's really high beef sub-index, high carcass weight. Just a bull that ticks all the boxes. And they're the sort of bulls that are available now. So we've made huge genetic progress in the last, I'll say, 5 years on the bulls available for the dairy herd. Calving difficulty hasn't increased. Carcass weight and carcass conformation has. And gestation length has been maintained as well. So then if you look at, once your calving is sorted, and all the bulls there in those panels, and we have Angus, Hereford, Limousin, Blue and Charolais, they're all under 5% calving difficulty. Most of the Angus and Hereford are well over 100, from about 110 up. And then once you get into your Continentals, your Limousin, your Charolais and your Blues, you're getting into beef sub-indexes of 140 to 170. And these are the bulls to use on your cows that you know are very, very good calvers. Okay, so just to sum up, sort out your cows first, divide them into groups according to parity, then sort out your panels of bulls, and pick out a few bulls for each group. Bulls you want to put on your second calvers, bulls you want to put on your cows, and for the really, if you really want to produce top-end calves, then pull out a few bulls to use in your mature cows as well. For the first 6 weeks of the calving season, you can be a bit less conservative in calving, and don't worry about gestation. For the second 6 weeks, really look at the short gestation bulls, and there's plenty available. Be a little bit more conservative in calving, and just watch the old cows. I would put the bulls that we recommend for second calvers on your older cows. And if you follow that program, you will maximise the value of your calf crop with absolutely no detriment to the profitability of the dairy enterprise on the farm. And you'll minimise by minimising calving difficulty and maximising the days of milk with the short gestation sires at the end. Great, Stuart, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Rose. So I suppose just a question that I have for you, Rose, is in relation to that calving difficulty piece. Is it actually nearly more down to the management of the cow that's creating the calving difficulty with the beef? Because it's always been the latter half of the season that the beef is coming, and that the calving difficulty is nearly created rather than actually coming from the animal, or a lot of it coming from the animal.
Yeah, it's a good point. There are a lot of factors involved in calving difficulty. So there's the genetics of the sire, there's the genetics of the dam. So the genetics of the sire, we're talking about the birth weights that he's likely to produce. And if you look at pedigree Angus and look at birth weights, you'll see birth weights there from about 25 kilos up to 55 kilos. Okay, so the genetics of the sire is important. Then the genetics of the dam, her calving ability. You know what I mean? So that's the genetic side of it. Obviously nutrition then. If cows are in too heavy a body condition, they will have bigger calves. And then also there's the management of the farm. If there isn't a lot of labour available on the farm, and you know what I mean, you do need easier calving bulls. But if you have a situation where there's more help available, there's more time for surveillance, higher calving difficulty bulls are there because the cow just might need a little bit of help.
Okay.
So there's a number of factors in it.
And the other question then is, so you're saying to use the better beef on the mature cows. Where's your age range for those cows that you're saying to use those lighter type bulls? Then what's the old cow in your mind? What lactation are we talking about?
Well, I'm talking about an old cow that physically looks old, and you can see that she's started to struggle. So your 6-7 lactation cow.
Okay. Any questions for Rose? Okay.
Most dairy cows have minus for beef. Is there any point really expecting a good beef calf out of them, no matter what bull you use?
It is a fair point. So every beef calf that's born from the dairy herd has a father and a mother, as we all know. Okay. So what I'm talking about here is what the beef bull can do. But absolutely, the less beef that's on the cow side, it will affect the quality of the calf. Okay, so we do have to watch. We do have to watch both sides. So if you have lower beef on your cows, and you want to produce a calf at high CBV, you really need to go for the very high bulls, and that's working. We've plenty of herd owners doing that. We've very good quality blue bulls there, for example, about 5% calving difficulty. Once a cow gets past second calver stage, she'll calve them fine. So I would say never, but you're right. The poorer quality of the cow, the poorer quality of the calf. So you need to be more careful then about the quality of the bull you put on her.
I suppose it just emphasises that there has to be greater emphasis put on the bull. So they're 50-50 in terms of the genetic contribution, but if we can beef up the contribution from the beef bull side, we can compensate for that lack of beef on the dam side. And I think, to be fair, like I've seen it looking at the mart sales here, coming through the mart here even, that where people are making that effort, that the only catch that's there at the moment is maybe the label on the card is misleading people, that the work that Ellen is doing is showing that these quality bulls are beginning to bring through a better quality calf. Now they're not the same as if you use a blue on a really high beef merit Friesian, you're going to have a really good calf. But if you use a blue on a low beef merit Friesian, you're still going to have a calf of quality. So you're talking 3-star versus 5-star, but they are becoming, they have a role to play. Like you can't write off the beef just because you have a bad beef merit in your herd of dairy cows.
The thing to do is to do your best to maximise it.
Yeah.
So just pay a bit of attention on the sires that are being used.
Okay.
Is there any solution for the people with the crossbreds using beef? Because you said if you look at the map, and I looked at the maps and you can see these fancy coloured calves coming in. They're not real fancy coloured calves, but when they look up when they're from Jersey crosses, you can see what you get, open the gate, let them off.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with you now, John. And I've seen calves going through here now this year.
€10 or whatever, like.
But I've seen JEX calves go through here and they've made €80-90 like. So I think the tide is turning without a doubt. And Dunne is very adamant that the most important thing that could happen in terms of calf sales is if that came off the mark board, and if CBV was the driver of the calf purchase rather than the colour of its snout or the letters that are behind the mother. Like, you know, that I know now. And
we want to look after the beef for this.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah, but that's.
The beef for this surely entitled to look up in the map there and see where the dam is coming from.
Oh no, okay. Well, you're picking me up wrong now in what I'm saying. And Dunne's angle is that because of the JEX, people turn away straight away, and like you said, the gates open and leave them out, and they have to be collected again. But the reality of it is if we follow what Rose is talking about there, And like that man at the back said there, if we compensate quite significantly for that lack of beef merit that we have on the cow side with the beef bull, we can actually deliver calves that are going to materialise into decent beef stock ultimately.
Yeah, and the important thing then is we have a commercial beef value for calves now. So if you're a dairy herd owner or you're making a really good effort to produce high value calves, especially if you have a guy coming into the yard, talk to him, show him the commercial beef value of the calves that you're giving him, because they're the higher they are, the higher the commercial beef value, the more profitable they will be for him. So show him what you're doing, but also make sure that if he's making more money, then the higher the beef value of the calf, that calf deserves a higher price as well. And if the appropriate price is being given for the calf, depending on its genetic merit, then the guy finishing the calves, you know, it's very fair on him because he knows what he's getting and he can decide himself what he wants to give for it. And he will be prepared to give a higher price for the higher CBV calves.
But on the flip side of that then, if the CBV, if the CBV, because I see myself like Frisian calves, and some of the better Frisian calves are plus 30 and some of the worst are minus 25. But if the CBV is going to take off, are we shooting ourselves in the foot down the line? When a fella will come down in a few years' time and he'll look up a minus 30 Frisian, he won't even beat on him.
The big thing there, John, is actually, and Alan, you're probably going to say it, is every calf has a value and the CBV is going to drive that value. So Rose's calf that she's talking about there, maybe plus 150, they're probably making 200, 250 currently. That minus 25 that you're talking about, they're the lads that are making the 20 and the 25. But Alan, your point is that they're still making money, but it's just the purchase price of that calf is important. So I accept where you're coming from, that if we're driving this merit, are we going to end up with an issue because with these lower quality calves? There's always going to be a lower quality calf. Rose is going to keep delivering in terms of better bulls year after year, so CBV will go from 150 to 170 to 180. There's going to be a calf that's minus 25 that will come up to 0, will come up to 25. So you're always going to have that range, but it's the price that you're going to pay for it is going to be the difference. And Joe just made a point to me there as well in relation to the calves that are being left through, maybe are getting very low bids. And again, I'm going to be stealing your thunder here, Alan. The age of that calf, the strength of the calf as well, on the day that they're coming through the market is actually very influential, as you know, in relation to the price that they're getting. So like the weighing of the calf has become very, very significant in terms of whether that calf sells for a decent price or even sells at all. So I think have faith in the CBV. I think Alan and his team are trying to educate people on the beef side of the house in terms of the importance of it. And it is, like Joe, you've made that point several times, that it's important, like you said, John, that our push towards CBV doesn't actually create a problem. But Alan is very adamant on it that once the person, like you said, Rose, once they know what they're buying, they know what's on the tin, they know what they're getting, they can still make a margin, but they have to be very disciplined in terms of the price that they're willing to give for that animal then in that situation. So, anyone else want to? Yeah, Fergal.
Rose, just there up on the board, you have a good few test bulls. You know, people would want to be aware that the calving difficulty of those isn't, you know, the reliability is low. Just people who want to be careful in case they think what's up as a test bull. You know, in reality, it might be lower or higher once there's calves on the ground out of that bull.
Absolutely.
People just want to be aware of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, a good point. So if you pick up the panels of bulls on the Munster Bovine stand on the way out, what you'll see. I was trying to put everything here on the one slide, which doesn't always work out. You'll see the panels in the catalogue. There's the bulls for the maiden heifers. Then there's panels of bulls by breed and advice on whether to put them on second calvers, cows and mature cows. And then the test bulls are clearly labelled. But you're absolutely right. A test bull is a test bull. So use him. Don't go wild in any test bull. And definitely don't use them on heifers. Because the calving figure can change. Having said that, any bull we will make available to the dairy herd owner, they're very, very carefully selected from the point of view of their index and their pedigree and their birth weight. So the bulls that are presented are very carefully selected in the first place. So it's not just any test bull, you know what I mean, if you know what I mean. But yeah, the point is you always need to be a bit more careful with test bulls.
And last question from me. Anyone else have any questions there, actually? Sorry. So the last question I put to you, Rose, is how important is it actually to use sire advice in relation to the beef bulls as well? Is there a help in assisting around that calving difficulty piece there as well, in terms of matching easy calving cows with maybe slightly harder calving bulls, that kind of a situation as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't. That can get very complicated, and you know what I mean. I try and keep it as simple as I can. Decide what breeds you want to use, divide up your cows, and then pick a team of bulls for your different parities. If we get too complicated, we just tend not to do it at all. Okay. You know what I mean? So I try and have a simple approach, and watch the calving, and then go for the highest beef sub-index. And
you mentioned the word there, team of bulls is very important as well. In that we always talk about the team from the dairy side of things, but there is obviously a potential risk with if somebody uses all one bull as their beef bull. Obviously they're not getting the effect of what you're talking about there in terms of using the higher beef merit animals as well. But if something were to go wrong with a bull, the risk is then that the calving pattern is destroyed in that herd. So you need a team of bulls, whether it's beef or dairy.
There's all sorts of benefits to using a team. You reduce the risk, you get to know the bulls yourself, you get to know what you're happy with and what you're not happy with, and then the following year you can do a better job.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so Alan, you said that you've only 3 slides, so you're going to tell us from the farmer's perspective of what you're talking to the lads that you're working with in the Dairy B500 programme in terms of trying to acquire the type of calves. So hand over to you, Alan.
Okay. Okay. Right. Thanks a million, Stuart. Okay, I'm not going to dwell too long on this, but it's just, I suppose, to put a few pointers out to you as who you're talking to and what do they want in terms of buying calves. So my role in Teagasc is we're kind of the link between dairy and beef in terms of trying to, I suppose, produce calves, encourage you to produce calves as dairy farmers that are much more saleable from a beef point of view, and talk to our farmers as well. And we have a number of monitor farms around the country that we work with to try and up their skill and try and get them to buy the best calf they can at the best price they can, whatever that may be, and make the best margin possible. So just to look first of all, right, who are you talking to, I suppose, as dairy farmers? The majority of guys you're dealing with, right, they're generally part-time farmers. That's your core audience. You have some guys that are buying maybe a large number of calves, maybe 150 to 300 calves that are maybe more on the full-time line of work. But most of the calves you're selling are going to go to part-timers, okay? And these guys, they're not poor with money, but they are very poor with time, okay? So the biggest thing they want is basically a calf that isn't going to give them too much trouble, I suppose. That's the biggest way of putting it. Generally, right, they're buying less than 40 calves per year, okay? So the average guy out there is buying, I think, 38 or 9 calves is the average number that's been bought by our beef farmers on the ground, okay? They do take them to various stages. It's not to say we call this dairy calf to beef, but it mightn't be them that does the beef side of it. So generally, look, they might be taking them through to store stage, maybe taking them through to 18 months. They might sell them off at stores at 24 months, or they might finish them at 30 months. There's a variety of ways of doing it. And generally, often what we're seeing is that these calves fit in with something else on the farm. So the reason is that it's not that they only have 40 acres, all of them, and this is all they can carry. Generally, they're falling in around another enterprise, such as sheep or sucklers or tillage or something else going on there. Often there might be suckler farmers buy a bunch of calves and they pick out the best heifers and they make the replacements. Okay, so that's the way it's worked. So what don't they want to get? I say the number one thing, I know we've talked a lot about genetics, but there's one thing that drives them mad is health issues. Okay, and that's pneumonias, scours, giant tail, and we can go on from there, I suppose. Okay, and I suppose that goes back to one reason being the majority of them are part-time and they haven't time to be dealing with this. So we're seeing a lot of trouble maybe on farms again this year. I'd say look, a share of it related to weather. You know, we're dealing, calves are inside in sheds and there's wind and rain blowing across them every night with storms, etc., and temperatures going up and down. So we are seeing trouble again on calves this year. But look, what can we do? They're there, that's it. In terms of genetics, right, we do want the best genetics, but we have a bit of a problem maybe, not with genetics in itself, but it's overpriced genetics. So look, it's one thing to buy a good calf or to buy a poor calf, it's what you pay for them. Like, we can make money out of any calf, we buy them right, okay? So a Frisian at €50 can maybe leave as much as a Continental maybe bought at €250 or €300, depending on where they lie in terms of CBV. And we've seen that with demo farms over the years, that the Frisian, before we had CBV and we had a bit more data into what exactly we're buying, before that an Angus was just an Angus running through a ring or bought out of a yard or a Hereford or whatever it was. We didn't know what they were. The Frisian was kind of a bit more of a safe bet, that by and large you knew they were going to come into 300 kilos of carcass or 310. They'd be an O or a P, one or the other, and they'd finish around 24 months. Okay, we knew we could do that, no problem. The problem was often buying maybe poorer genetics, maybe in terms of within breed. So buying extremely poor Anguses or Herefords or whatever that were low down on the carcass value, and they'll finish in at maybe a lighter weight than maybe a Frisian, and they costing maybe €100 or €150 more. Okay, that was where the problem was lying, and that's what probably gave some of this a bit of a bad name. Okay, the other thing is light calves. Okay, and young calves. If you look at the marts in the last while, and I've been watching a few of them there online the last number of weeks, there's a hell of a difference between a calf that's a bit of weight in it and a bit of age, versus a young calf that's very light looking. I mean, I see last week there on was it Journal or something I saw, there was Frisians went through, they were 5 weeks old for 130 in one of the marts, and at the same sale there was Anguses at 41 kilos or something, and they made a fiver. Farmers want something with a bit of structure, a bit of frame, a bit of bone, something that is a little farther on the line in terms of the rearing process. You have to remember, these calves they're only babies at the end of the day. They're young, they're susceptible to disease. So if we wanted something that's got a bit less risk, I suppose, with it. And that risk kind of goes out of it around the 3 to 4 week mark. Okay, so if you're willing to hold calves, so around that 3 to 4 week, you have a lot more buyers than if you're trying to sell them at 10 days to 2 weeks. Okay. I'd say a light carcass at finish as well is another problem, and again CBV will kind of counteract a lot of that. We have a lot more data coming on stream now in terms of CBV and what the genetics are in terms of the calves we're buying. So it should lead through to maybe a bit more confidence in what we're buying as farmers. Okay. So what do you want to avoid? I would say under 50 kilos. If you're selling calves under 50 kilos, you're in that risk category of maybe you might have to send them back home, or you're going to take a fiver for them. Okay, that's where you are. Once you hit north of that 50 kilos and north of 3 weeks, you have a lot more people that are more interested in taking those calves away, and we'll give you a decent price in fairness for them. Okay, it says genetics there. What I mean there is poor genetics, right? Okay, if you're using a Hereford or you're using an Angus or you're using whatever breed you're using, or Belgian Blue, use the best possible one you can, the one that's going to deliver carcass. Don't pick the one with the plus 2 kilos of carcass, or plus 1 kilo of carcass, or minus 1, whatever it is. Pick the one that, Rosa showing examples there, bulls up to 12, 13, 14 kilos or whatever for an Angus. Pick them, they're easy calving, we've seen it, we have high reliability to back them up. They're the ones you're using. There's no excuse anymore for using, I suppose, low carcass merit bulls, because that's all that matters to the beef farmer is carcass. When he's buying that calf off you, being honest, he doesn't care what he was like to calve. He doesn't care what he was like in terms of gestation. He just cares, is he healthy and will he grow? That's it. Nothing else matters. Okay? As you said, look, the low CBV calves, we can still make money on them and you can still move them. Okay? It might mean you have to hold them a little bit longer if you have them. Okay? Once they're healthy and they've, some bit of reasonable genetics in them within breed. If they're a Frisian and the man down there gave an example of, there's a variation within the Frisians, look, we accept that. That's always going to be there. And we have plenty of farmers that are able to buy these calves and are still able to turn a margin on the Frisian. Okay? And they are probably an animal that won't be as plentiful in future with the advent of sex semen and with the advent of CBV. Okay, they're not going to be as many there, but if they are there, look, once they're looked after well and there's a decent weight in them and a decent size, they will move. Okay? I'd say setting the bar a bit too high in price is a bit of a problem in some places, and it's more to do with, I suppose, people coming into your yards. Look, what you want to do when someone's coming into your yard to buy calves, you want them coming back again next year. You don't want to blow them out and say, I want 250 for these calves, and they say no, and you sell them in the market for 150. That's pointless. And I've heard many stories of that happening. Okay? What you want is someone that's going to come in, set a mid-price range. No one comes into your yard expecting to get calves for nothing. but at the same time they don't be expecting to pay in the top dollar price for all calves in the yard. If they're going to come in and they're going to take 40 or 50 calves out of you every year, you know, that's worth its weight in gold. Someone that's going to come in with a box every Saturday, load up their calves, take them away, and leave you with a check. That's what you want. And you want to do the same next year, and there's no negotiating really, or there's no bargaining, or there's no worry about anything. They know the calves are healthy, there's a reasonable level of genetics put into them, and you know they're what they expect in terms of age, 3 weeks or thereabouts. That should be where we want to be. And we also, again, I've said it a few times, but producing calves with these low carcass weight bulls used, that's the big no-no. You know, what we want is that if we buy a calf that's, let's say, for €200 as an early maturing breed, Hereford or Angus, you know, he's going to outdo what we got from a Frisian. He's going to be 320 kilos date. He's going to be an O+. He's going to get all the bonuses, and he's going to leave us with a higher margin and justify that extra money that we're putting out there to buy these better calves. That's what has to be given, okay? So what to target? I would say calves a minimum 3 weeks of age. Don't go under that, I would say, if you want repeat customers. 50 to 60 kilos is where most guys are setting the bar, okay, in terms of calf weight. High CBV calves now, they are going to be a higher price, and everyone accepts that. And it's probably not making a lot of impact yet across marts and across farm CBV. It's probably due to, in some cases, a lack of awareness on the dairy side, where people that do know what it is buying the calves are asking the dairy farmer what is the CBV, and they say they don't know what that is. Or else the beef farmer buying them doesn't actually understand CBV either, or doesn't maybe understand where to set the price yet. And that's going to come in time, you know, it's going to come over the next few years. People will get a gradually better handle on what a certain CBV is worth versus the beef price and versus the input cost. It's just going to take a little bit of time for this to all filter through, but it's an education thing, and it's something we're going to work on as as advisors within Teagasc, to try and educate farmers as to you know where to set your pricing point. Okay, as I said, high health status is number one. No matter whether it is the worst crossbred Frisian or whatever it is coming in, or it is the best Belgian blue that you can find, if the health is wrong, it'll drive everyone demented, because one of them sick is worse than trying to rear 50 healthy ones. You know, it just takes up all your time and costs and stress and the whole lot on both men and beasts. So health status is the most important thing on these calves, and the environment they come out of, which is on your farms as dairy farmers, can have a big impact on that. Okay, vaccinations is one thing I would say. Look, if I was to give one little snippet, if you would maybe talk to if people are coming with more regular customers buying your calves, you can work maybe more on the vaccination side of things. The biggest problem we see outside of maybe touches of scour coming in on calves is pneumonia, okay? And generally that tends to set in at around 4 weeks or thereabouts. Generally it's kind of a week or so after they move on to a new farm. And look, moving on to a new farm is a stressful experience for a young calf. Generally talking to vets, look, RSV and PI3, which is counteracted by the most of these intranasal vaccines you can buy, they're the ones that are causing most of the trouble, okay? We generally would try and recommend, if people are coming in to buy calves off you on a more regular basis, if you let them in, to maybe vaccinate them in the farm before they move. So if you do a deal, let's say on a Tuesday or Wednesday, you know, if you allow a guy come in the following day, stick the intranasals into them, you know, if they're moving out on the following Saturday, whenever, which is typically what happens on the part-time farms, you know, the vaccine is starting to kick in at that stage, and generally you have a better chance that you won't have animals getting sick within a week. But we do see that when they move, it's within about 7 days after, that's when the problems start to kick in, you know. And moderate pricing, look, as I said, no one's expecting to give you nothing for calves, but at the other end of the thing, they expect some bit of balance in terms of where the price of the calves is set, that it's something that they can come back to again and again and again, and they'll, you know, you want someone to come back into your yard taking all those calves. So I suppose, just to summarise then, I suppose in terms of building a relationship, I'd say, look, use your CBV to promote your calves. I mean, some people are saying at a meeting the other day, you know, you could stick up an ad and do a deal in the month of January and say, you know, I'll have 50 calves with X CBV across the board expected, based on the bulls I've used, available from February onwards, if anyone wants to contact me. You know, show what you have. I mean, if you have put in the effort and you do have good calves coming on the ground, you know, promote it, you know, sell your wares. It's your job to do that. I'd say be willing to hold these calves. I mean, I know, look, you can maybe get under pressure at times with sheds filling up, but typically, as I said, most of your farmers are part-timers. Their Saturday or Sunday is their day for collecting calves. They come into your yard. They might be able to come in during the week and buy them, and do a deal with you, but generally they're going to say, listen, will you hold it for 3 or 4 days or whatever it is, you know. And look, it's important to give them that bit of flexibility, and look at the other end, if they know that you're under serious pressure, they'll I'm sure most will make an effort as well and take those calves maybe a day or two after if the pressure's on your side, you know. But don't be under pressure, don't be trying to shift those calves out at 2 weeks of age. It's the biggest no-no ever at this stage. Colostrum vaccines and reared in a good environment. If we look, any of the farmers, we have over 2,000 calves coming onto our demo farms, I'd say at this stage. The first thing they nearly look at is, you know, where are the calves coming from? If they go in and they see a reasonably well laid out calf shed, well bedded with straw and clean, and calves look healthy and nothing too off there, you know, they're a lot more confident in what they're going to be giving you for those calves when you want to sell them. Colostrum, if you could guarantee every farmer that you've treated every calf with enough colostrum, giving them that 2 to 3 litres at birth and ensuring you've paid attention to that, that's a lifesaver. It's probably like giving them a second vaccine. The vaccines in themselves are important, I think, and I probably think they do need to start going in a little bit earlier. We've seen it where a couple of the farmers have gone in a bit before moving the calves with the vaccines. They seem to have a little less trouble, that they do seem to have a much healthier calf coming on farm. I would say try to do a deal for maybe all your calves you can if someone's coming into your yard, and that's kind of where our farmers like to go as well, you know. They don't really want to be going back into your yard negotiating every week for another bunch of calves, another 5 or another 10. They'd be quite happy probably to just do a deal for, let's say, 40 or 50 calves of a certain breed, or heifers or bulls or whatever comes, and say, look, just text me as they come and I'll be collecting them. You know, as I said, they're time poor. They want to make it as simple as possible. They don't want any fishing or driving around looking at jars. They just want to know there's calves there, pick them up at 10 o'clock on a Saturday or 11 or whatever it is, and they're gone. Simple. Keep it simple. The dairy beef scorecard is something that I think you all have as dairy farmers in your backup. And we were looking at one last week on a farm there, and you know what it did show was all these calves had left the farm, or most of them left the farm. And you know the performance on the farms they went on to was excellent. It was exceptional. You know, I was showing that bullocks were coming into 330 or 40 kilos at 24 months. Heifers were coming into a little bit lighter at a younger age, obviously as well. You know, that dairy beef scorecard. If anyone wants to know, put a bit more confidence into someone when you're trying to sell calves. Use that. Bring it out. Print it off, and say, here's what my calves did. It'll take into account any calf that left your farm in the last number of years. So if they're gone to another farmer, he buys them, he finishes them, it'll show what they did, where they came. Now it doesn't take into account obviously farmer influence and whether the farmer did a good job or a bad job, but you know, if you can check it up and see, and it's a great tool just to put a bit of confidence in that when you're asking for 150 or whatever, 200 for your calves or whatever, that a guy can say, right, they should turn into something like this and should leave me with a margin at the end of the day. And I suppose the number one thing I says, you know, outside of the health, beef farmers, they'll pay for genetics once they're confident they'll give it back. Okay, so they want to know what carcass growth is, and they want to know what performance will be. You know, so they want an animal that's going to grade, is going to weigh, and is going to not cause them too much trouble in the health department. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, Alan, thank you. So, Alan, just in a way, you're looking at it all the way around to maybe what we would have initially been looking at it. So you're looking at the beef index and the carcass and the conformation. Are there parameters there that you want to kind of outline to people that we should, like I take John's point, I take your point in relation to that there's a lack of traction with the CBV maybe at the minute, but like that doesn't mean that the farmers that are here in this room that are going to be breeding beef calves shouldn't be embracing this and going with it immediately, because they're going to be ahead of the curve effectively when it does take off.
Exactly, and I suppose the calves that you're going to be selling in a year's time, you know, I mean CBV, you're breeding today for next year. So I mean, by next year we'll have a bit more emphasis put on CBV. You know, we'll have another 12 months of, you know, getting the message out there. It will come in time, and in time, people will buy calves off CBV. You know, breed will go out the window to a certain degree. You know, when you're picking EBI for your cows, for your dairy cows, you know, you focus on traits. It's going to be the same with CBV. People are going to focus on traits in terms of weight, in terms of conformation, and in terms of, you know, what kind of a calf am I going to end up with. It's not going to really matter whether it's an Angus or a Charolais or whatever. It's going to be, let's say, right, focus on what's this animal going to turn into. Is it going to give me a 280 kilo carcass, or is it going to give me a 330 kilo carcass? That's all that matters.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, there's one there, Sean. then we have another one down to back on the left as
Thanks.
well.
Just quick question there, Alan. The dairy beef programme is the Dairy Beef 500, which is, I understand, a target of €500 net margin per hectare.
Yes.
Which doesn't include the labour charge of same. So that would be €200 an acre minus the labour, which I suppose would be 10 or 15 hours per livestock unit.
Yeah, you'd possibly be right there, yeah. Basically, look, if you look at what we've achieved the last few years, just to summarise it, I didn't go into today, but the Monitor farms have achieved a net margin of around 500 to 550 a hectare the last couple of years, right? And if we take the stocking rate on that, it's around little over 2 calves taken through to finish per hectare. So you're talking about 200 a head is the net profit across the board, okay?
So the question I'm trying to get to here now, so out of that they have to pay for their labour costs as well. So the thing is, at $12.70 an hour minimum wage nowadays, can we see more people wanting to rear these calves or less people wanting to rear these calves now that we are in a system of BIS which encourages lower stocking rates rather than higher stocking rates?
Right, okay. You're probably, the vast majority of people that are buying calves are not running a very high stocking rate anyway, especially if they're in a part-time scenario. You know, it's very tricky in a part-time scenario to try and stock the place to the hilt and at 3 livestock units to the hectare. You know, you're probably talking with someone that's going to be down more towards 1.5 or 1.7 livestock units to the hectare. I suppose our poor full-time farmers that are buying bigger numbers would be running probably a higher stocking rate, I would say. You know, they'd be running probably closer into derogation territory. And look, their margins are that little bit better. I suppose if we're talking about how many people want to rear calves, well, look, the stats aren't great on that. For every 10 farmers that are rearing calves this year, there's probably going to be 6 of them gone out of it in 5 years' time. That's the statistic. It's about a 40% kind of recurrence rate in terms of rearers. That's just the national statistic. So people fall in and fall out of this every so often. The one thing I'd say is, I suppose, is the suckler herd is dropping year on year. There's probably going to be a fair drop in numbers of suckler cows this year again, based on the number of initial calvings. So I imagine people may look at this as another option to maybe replace suckler cows as they start to fall back a bit. And look, it's reasonably profitable. It's not too bad. Like, I mean, if you're talking as a part-time scenario, okay, €500 a hectare is good. Full-time, not so good. You probably need to be doubling it, you know. But look, I suppose, as I said, it's a game that kind of people fall in and out of very quickly, and there's a myriad of reasons for that. It mightn't be entirely down to the calf. It might be just labour availability, or it may be, I suppose, they mightn't have been doing the job right day one, you know.
Okay, will you have another question there?
Yeah, Alan, I'm just taking you back to your Angus calf there, under 40 kilos or whatever on the mat. How long would you actually have to hold that calf to bring him up to closer to 50?
Well, sure, you'd expect a calf will do 0.7 of a kilo a day inside, you know. So if you want to get an extra, you know, up to maybe 50 kilos, you're probably talking an extra fortnight, roughly. That's where you're going.
And you're probably talking about €50 going into him, I suppose, aren't you?
Yeah.
So will you get that back on him, like?
You may. I don't know. It's the cost of doing business, you know. Yeah. I mean, it's essentially people just want a strong calf, you know. I mean, no one wants to be taking the risk of the light calves anymore.
No, but when you take the low beef index in a cow, will say, will it take you a lot longer to get that calf up to the 50 kilos, like?
Yeah, look, that's probably a bit of a risk that if you do have a very low beef marrow cow, that, yeah, you will probably have to carry him that little bit longer, maybe towards the 5 weeks or thereabouts before you get him towards that weight. And yeah, I've been talking to farmers that are looking at their options with this. They have seen maybe, you know, saying that, you know, if they're very highly crossbred cows, maybe almost pure Jersey or something, where you're naturally have a smaller cow in that scenario, they're looking at maybe holding the calf to maybe 6 weeks of age before they move them and looking at their options there.
But again, though, they need to look at the actual emphasis of the beef that they're putting in there, so that they actually have, like, if they do have to hold them for longer, that they're going to get some return for the type of animal that they're selling. Yeah. So if you have a bad Angus and a bad Friesian, no matter how long you're going to keep them, you're not going to get rewarded for it.
That's exactly it, yeah. So you do have to up their game a bit more if you're dealing with light calves, and maybe use something with a bit of a higher carcass merit, you know. That's where you're going.
Okay, just last question there. So
just CBB, where do you get that? value, or is it on any reports, or does it come up in the mark board even, or does it?
If the calf is genotyped and the genotype is back on the calf, it will appear in the mark board.
Oh, it's just genotype calves.
Well,
so
if you don't have a genotype, as a dairy farmer, you can go onto your ICBF. You have to register a sire, and that's where most of us cut out. About 40% there's only about 40% of beef calves coming off dairy farms were actually showing a sire, and what we've seen the last number of years, there was no sire recorded on a lot of them. But if you do have a sire registered, you can click on profiles on ICBF, and you will see a tab for a CBV, and that will give you a list of every single calf registered in your farm with a sire, with a CBV, and you can print that off or show it to a guy on your phone, you know, when he comes to look at your calves. But if you don't, if you haven't the genotype, you can still sell them out of your yard with a CBV.
So the reason for that is it has to be verifiable. So there's nothing stopping you saying that it was a particular bull you used, whereas the genotype, when they're coming through the mark, is verifying that, and that's why they only come up on the mark boards when they are genotyped. But hopefully that will increase over the next number of years. Obviously with the NGP last year, there's a big surge in that this year, and in future years there'll probably be more and more stock come through that are going to be genotyped. So that will reinforce CBV in that sense as well, and it'll give Allen's people more confidence in terms of the animal that they're buying as well. Okay, so we'll wrap it with you for now, Alan, and you'll be back up afterwards. So when we asked Joe to do this a couple of weeks ago, we didn't think we'd be talking about the nutrition scenario that we're talking about. We were talking about driving on our breeding season and making sure cows were going to be right and operating grand. Whereas I suppose, Joe, you nearly have to deal with a little bit of keeping them right at the minute, and to make sure that they are going to be okay for when we do hit breeding season in a couple of weeks' time. Joe, as you know, is my boss. He's
the hardest job in the country.
He's the head of the dairy knowledge transfer of Teagasc, but he is steeped in nutrition, having done PhD and worked in that nutrition area for a good number of years before taking on his current role. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Stuart. Is it afternoon yet? It is afternoon at this stage. Right, so look, I got the graveyard shift here, and again, as Stuart said, we did have to sort of change tack a little bit based on the current conditions. So I've been on a bit of a tour of the country the last week or so. So from Monaghan all the way down to West Cork, and things aren't good, and I would say probably worse, to be honest, down here than they are up our side of the country. Good to see that, talking to the lads in Ballyhaise lately, they're grazing by day. They've about 60% of the farm grazed, which is higher than the average in this area at the moment. So it just shows this is not, the current situation is not a wetland or a dry land situation, it's a weather situation. And given that, I suppose that's a good thing, because I think it can turn quite quickly, you know. So look, what I want to try and do is maybe run a few things here that sort of maybe knit those two things together. Obviously the weather situation as it is at the moment is impacting obviously on people's mood and on people's enthusiasm for the job, and also the nutrition of the herd. So what does it mean for the cow, I suppose? What can we do about it in the short term? And maybe, you know, what can we keep in mind from a fertility perspective? So look, we know this, it's an old story, but it's a good story around body condition score, and we've talked about this for years, and we keep talking about it because it's important every year, right? So really, what are we saying here? Our ideal profile for body condition, as we know, is calving at around 3 1/4, no more than a sort of a half a score loss in the sort of early part of the season, and holding that sort of 2.75 through the breeding season without losing a whole pile. Importantly, I think we need to make the point as well is, if you look at the red line there, which is over fat at calving, you can see really that you can have a situation where you could have two animals that are both at condition score 2.75 coming into breeding, one of them in a good position and one of them in a bad position, because it's about how much they've lost in the meantime. So our late calvers and our over-conditioned cows, and maybe, you know, we have to keep an eye on that, you know, certainly with longer, I'd say last year we had more people with longer dry periods. There were issues maybe around that. Obviously too thin at calving, they have nothing to lose, but have less condition to lose, but it's still, they're too low coming into the breeding season. So look, it is a significant challenge to hold body condition in the current conditions. It's not all down to just feeding. The genetics has a major effect as well, and we have to keep emphasising that. You know, it is a situation, and I think it's important when we're picking our genetics, that there is a certain type of genetics out there that makes it easier to stay on the blue line. And really what we want from body condition, from a combination of breeding and a combination of breeding and feeding, really, we can get towards genetics that can hold and turn the corner quite quickly. So look at, we all talk about the numbers, but what do they actually look like? I would say that's what we're looking at for sort of 275, maybe 3 of a condition. That kind of condition. We know what that looks like. We know ourselves, without putting a number on it, what sort of fit for breeding looks like. So I would be saying that, we talked earlier with Dennis about, using sex semen or whatever. Animals in that type of condition are ideal. If they were on our list for sex semen, we'd say, yeah, that's no problem, and we have to hold them at that and make sure that, that's where we need to be. So maybe something similar like that. Not rolling in fat by any means, given they're at peak lactation, but certainly cover on the tail head, cover on the short ribs. That's kind of what we're looking for, really. And if that animal is getting plenty of grass on a rising plane of nutrition, is cycling, and has the mineral status and shape, we're in a good position for using any straw, and sex semen in particular. Probably, and maybe worryingly, we're starting to see a bit more of this around the place. So Stegosaurus, really, where we can really see the backbone starting to show, and that's we're sort of in trouble there a little bit, and that's going to take time to repair. So maybe that's some of our best cows or our heaviest milking cows. You'd be exercising caution probably on some of those maybe, but there is still time to get those back and again. So more, I hope this isn't too familiar to a lot of people, because that's maybe where we can get to with a couple of rough weeks. So again, though, I would make the point that we spent over a quarter of a century or more at this stage doing research on the effect that meal has on body condition score. Unfortunately, there are certain genotypes or certain types of cow out there that, irrespective if we lurry in 6 and 7 kilos of concentrate into that cow over the next 6 weeks, it still probably won't be enough to fix the body condition in time for breeding. So don't think that it's all coming out of the meal bin. Oftentimes the solution to body condition score issues actually comes out of the AI flask, not out of the meal bin, and it's important that we remember that. Okay, so that's body condition. So just in our minds what they look like, where we're trying to hold them to, and we'll come to a second now how that's possible in the current situation. Okay, look, just looking at the current situation, I spoke to Mick O'Donovan in Moore Park last night about this, just to see where the pasture-based averages are at the moment, so you can put these relative to yourselves at the moment. The good news story, I suppose, compared to other years where we had problems, there is actually a lot of grass on farms. There is a lot of feed on farms. There's plenty of grass out there actually. On average, on the pasture-based farms, we have 900 kilos of an average farm cover, or thereabouts. So of course you're sitting there thinking, of course there's loads of grass on farms because we can't get out to graze it. But that's a difficulty, I suppose. But it still means there's an opportunity when things do change. We have something to go to, which is important to say as well. Okay. On average, we're at about 50% grazed, a little over 50% grazed. This time last year, that was closer to 80%. Okay, so we're a fair bit behind. 35% of farms have nitrogen spread, 65% with no chemical N out yet, which is a bit of a worry. That's going to have to be obviously a priority when things turn. So, I spoke on a webinar last night, and a lot of questions were coming back in, and a lot of the comment and questions coming back in for people in the east of the country was, it's going to take a week for the farm to repair. Okay, I think that's a dangerous message for people to have in their head. I think we should be looking at this, that the situation as it is at the moment, it can change quite quickly. 2 or 3 dry days would do an awful lot for people, which is a good thing to say, I hope. And if it's changing and it's dry overhead, grass by day, at least grass until lunchtime as soon as possible. We'll look in a second what that'll do for the diet, but I know it might seem like it's easy for me to be standing here saying put them out until lunchtime, but it does work, and I think we have to just push it a little bit. The worry I would have when we start talking an awful lot about nutrition and different diets and what we're going to feed and all this kind of stuff is we'll end up committing to a fancier diet, and we'll end up stuck on it for 10 days. What we really have to be doing is bridging the gap for the moment and hoping we can get back out to something that looks like normal as soon as possible. So a few things on that. Don't worry too much about residuals for the first couple of days back at it. I would say as well, we need to learn the difference between, or maybe relearn the difference between poaching and marking. They're not the same thing. There's a little bit of caution that's come into people, I think, over the last couple of years. Be a bit brave, I suppose, and try and get back to at least grass in the diet for a few hours in the day. And look, at one of the things we said quite a bit in the spring, and I think we should continue to do it. I know most people have moved well past peak of calving at this stage, but there are still going to be some fresh calvers or some problem cows in the herd. I suppose what we're saying is don't let a small number of sort of dodgy cows, if you like, dictate what happens to the rest of them. If you have to hold those back and draft them and keep them in for a few days while the rest of them get out to grass by day, then fair enough. So keep your colostrum group going, keep them sort of out of the tank. As they're out of the tank, keep them separate, keep them in for a couple of days, let the rest of them off as soon as we can, and be flexible. Look, if it means that we can let half the cows out this morning and another half out this evening, each to get about a grazing, depending on your farm situation, all those things should be on the table. Just be flexible, get some grass down the throat, okay? Why are we saying that, or why are we putting so much emphasis on that? I suppose we're trying to look here at what it looks like in terms of limited grazing and what it means for the diet. Now, there is a worry on a lot of farms, and we can see it coming through on milk proteins, and speaking to some of the guys in Dairygold about this, there are farms that are collapsing with protein really, and milk production not going where it needs to be. And part of the reason, I suppose, is that when we're in a situation that we're waiting for the thing to turn, possibly the diets aren't adjusted at all, and if there's no grass in the diet, and a small amount of like the grazing levels of concentrate plus silage, let's say, particularly with ordinary enough silage, total dry matters intakes might be as low as 15 to 16 kilos in total, which may be just a little bit low for where cows should be at the moment, particularly those going to peak. Okay, so you can see on the left hand side of the board there, a typical diet with sort of ordinary enough silage, like 70 DMD silage is really. It's not good enough for milkers and too good for dry cows in a lot of cases. But in that situation, it's not untypical to see maybe 20-21 kilos of milk being supported with body condition loss, and maybe not much more than about 3.15, certainly not more than 3.2 protein being supported. The same herd with grass by day could certainly get that up to sort of into the 340s for protein, just by getting even 6 kilos grass in per day. The grass by day can have we all know this. We're sort of preaching to the converted here a little bit, but it's just to remind to get back out, and the difference you will see first is in the protein percent, and that stands to reason given the composition of fresh grass versus 70 DMD silage. If you can't get out and you're stuck indoors full time for the next few days, it is a case probably of looking at maybe something like increasing the concentrate in the parlour for the few days, with the view of getting it back down as soon as possible. Maybe a couple of kilos of a high energy straight like hulls or beet pulp possibly in the middle of the day, just to prop up cows for the next few days. I wouldn't be committing, as I said, to having very elaborate changes to diet, because I know we spoke a lot at other meetings this week about all sorts of winter style diets being put together. Hopefully by the time all those things get into the yard and everything is all sorted out, we could end up back where we started and back out at grass again. And how many times have we seen in the past people buying wet feeds or straights like that and ending up with those in the corner of the yard and having to use them up while the thing repairs. So whatever we do in the short term, make it as simple to put in and also as simple to take out as possible. So in my view, that's probably as simple as extra powder concentrate, maybe something like hulls or pulp in the middle of the day, see it out, make sure the animals get enough energy for the next few days, with the view to getting back to grazing as soon as we can. And obviously with grass full time, we could be more certainly there, and we do see some herds at the moment on grass full time. They're sitting in the 365, 370 mark for protein. You can do the numbers on that yourself in terms of what that means for milk price, but it all counts. And in a high cost situation at the moment, and margins being tight, I think we have to emphasise more about them few hours of grass will pay. It'll pay you very well. It'll pay you a few €100 a week on a standard 100 cow herd to start making that move back out again. So look, that's, we have to just make the point, I suppose, Stuart, here that, we've often heard about, obviously Teagasc, what else are we going to say, only put the cows out to grass, I suppose, fair enough, but we should make the point though that when we do all our work that we would have said previously around the benefits of early grazing and all of that, it was always done relative to a good quality indoor diet. What we don't want is a situation where we have cows on a bad indoor diet with no adjustments and no grass going on in either. It's one or the other. The cost will obviously be higher indoors, but don't let conditions strip for the moment. And in most cases, the difference is the equivalent of something in the equivalent of maybe somewhere around 3.5 to 4 kilos of concentrate per day is the difference in having grass in the diet or not having it in the diet. But the cow needs the energy, is the point. Okay? Look at, when we mentioned about concentrate and feeding, okay, so this is some work from Corrin's out the road from over a number of years. High concentrate versus low concentrate over the early period, assuming they're in the right condition to begin with. And all I just want to point out here is that if we look at the first 50 to 80 days of lactation, in a situation where we have plentiful grass in the diet, the effect that higher concentrate levels will have don't really kick in until the latter half of the lactation actually. So in the first 100 days, really before breeding, it doesn't, the difference between sort of 4 kilos and 5 kilos or 6 kilos, if we have enough grass in the diet, doesn't make that much difference to body condition, okay? It's surprising to say that. So that's why it's very difficult actually to make any difference to fertility, assuming we have enough grass in the diet. Any marginal differences in concentrate mightn't make as much difference as you think to the body condition. However, we look at the same work done, we had differences in genetics as well. So low EBI, so sort of more high milk volume type animals, low solids, high body weight, let's say, or low maintenance index, I should say, versus your higher EBI Frisian type animal. Clearly, over numbers of years, the higher EBI animal is easier to keep right for condition. So therefore, we can't just talk about concentrate, we also have to say what genetics is in place as well. The genetics, those animals will turn the corner. If we get a good week at all, they'll be gone from a body condition point of view, which is a good thing. There's a certain type of animal there that's hard to fix body condition using concentrate. We know that, but we just have to keep that in mind. Okay? What does that mean for from a fertility perspective? Given with similar diets, we look at high fertility versus low fertility subindex animals. The same milk yield, better body condition on the same diet, shorter onset of cyclicity, a lower percentage failing to ovulate, more cows showing visible heat, fewer silent heats, fewer false heats. Everything pointing in the direction of EBI at a similar level of body condition, right? Of feeding. I should make the point, obviously, that irrespective of whether they're high index or low index animals, in the current scenario, they do need to be fed to the level that they require. What I'm just saying is you won't get any major beneficial response to fertility if the fertility subindex of the animals is low to begin with, if I'm making that point, okay? So look, I'm just going to skip maybe through in the interest of time, Stuart, when we come into, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time when we get into mid-season and things maybe settle down a little bit. We just want to make the point in terms of responses to concentrate if we're into the second and third round grazing. Something we've looked at a bit over the last couple of years. We often hear this thing about, concentrate gives us a one-to-one response or a better than a one-to-one response. What we've sort of looked at, we've modelled and looked at this over the years and looked at it in practice as well. The response to concentrate that you're going to get in mid-season will differ depending on how much of it that you feed. Okay, so all I'm going to say from this slide is if we look at here, the response on the right hand side, there's a bigger response to your first 2 kilos of concentrate than your last 2 kilos if you're feeding up to 6 kilos. So there is a point somewhere in the middle that actually the response becomes uneconomic for a lot of farms. So your first couple of kilos gives you a response that's over 1 possibly. Your last or second, your 5th and 6th kilos will give you much less response. That stands to reason. On the bottom of the graph, if you see a poorer quality grass, lower grass covers, you will always get a better response to concentrate on poorer quality grass, but the problem is that your economics in that situation is always going to be worse. The production is always best on the top level. So when you look at that, it's an old story, but a good story, I suppose. in and around that high quality grass plus a couple of kilos of concentrate during breeding is probably where we need to be sitting from a fertility and from a production perspective. So just remember that there is a decline in response to meal. What you get for the first two shouldn't encourage you to feed a bit more, because more or less you are going to get less the more you feed. Okay? Just on minerals briefly, and we can take maybe more clarification and questions on this, Stuart, but just in the interest of time, we have to think about minerals in two ways, I suppose. Our trace minerals, which is our small minerals, our tiny fed, your cobalt, copper, selenium, iodine, zinc. They're fed in tiny quantities. They can be covered with a mineral pack to the cows or through the wall, whichever system you want. But the macro minerals are required in larger quantities. So that's your magnesium, sodium, calcium, and phosphorus, which I've highlighted in particular. We have seen it in a couple of areas over the last number of years, maybe after a difficult spring or particularly a particularly harsh April, where we might see signs of phosphorus deficiency on farms, poor uptake of phosphorus by the plant, leading to low phosphorus in grass, leading to phosphorus issues. The classic licking of stones and poor fertility will result from that as well. So my point here, I suppose, really is that when we talk about minerals for the breeding season, we have to be clear as to which mineral it is we're talking about. The solution for phosphorus deficiency is more phosphorus in the diet. The solution for copper deficiency is more copper in the diet. You cannot bolus phosphorus. It would have to be put in the concentrate, generally, or provided external to the concentrate in grams per day, whereas your trace elements can be added to the concentrate, or in individual cases it might be through the water or through boluses. But just remember, we have to. You could be in a situation, for example, where you say you have a mineral deficiency problem. You could be using boluses to fix that, but if it's a phosphorus problem, you'll have missed the point. So, to me, just keep an eye on the phosphorus ones, and maybe in the discussion we might come back on that, because I've seen it on a few herds over the last number of years where we tested bloods right at the start of the breeding season and quite deficient for phosphorus. It will affect conception rate. So just be careful on that one. But just a final point on it, it's not that difficult to fix. It can be fixed through the concentrate quite readily. It's more just to be aware of it rather than to worry too much about it. Cover them and move on, I suppose. One final question, or maybe one final thing to cover. Often we hear this, maybe when we get into mid-season, and hopefully if we get into good grass covers and into better quality. The question, is there too much nitrogen in the grass? Will it affect fertility? The short answer to that is really no. If we're looking at high quality pasture, sort of 1,300-1,400 covers, even if milk urea looks like it's up a little bit, in most terms it's not the primary issue around conception rate. The bigger issue is body condition, plain and nutrition, and possibly the phosphorus issue as well. Okay? The energy balance question is much bigger than the protein one, and in most cases it's not as big an issue as people might think. We often hear this about embryo deaths, about protein and reabsorption and all the rest, but I wonder about that sometimes. Too much protein in the grass, I would say no. I suppose a couple of things you just do maybe as a belt and braces on it. We don't want very excessive levels of protein or very high nitrate, but in normal circumstances, not a big issue. So just on that, in terms of managing any risk around it, just watch it. If we're not, we're talking about a drought here, which we shouldn't be, but in the situations coming in and out of very dry weather conditions, just avoid that double up of nitrogen fertilizer. If you have a lot of reseeds to graze, possibly for a few days just mix them between day and night, between older and younger pasture. If you have a lot of area to get through, maybe a new bit of ground or something like that, just mix it up. Feed your lower protein concentrate, there's no issue at all. It would go down to sort of 12 to 14% crude protein on grass. It'll work very, very well. And don't restrict energy intake during breeding. So maybe what we need to be looking at there is 36 hours allocation of grass, or certainly 24 hours, rather than strip grazing through every grazing. Those are more important things than worrying about a percentage point or two in the grass. Okay, so that's it. Thanks, Stuart.
So Joe, I'll ask the other speakers to hop up here while I just ask you this question. And so effectively the drop in protein that people are seeing in their milk isn't related to protein levels that they're feeding necessarily.
At the moment?
Yeah. It's all energy.
It's energy, but it's really energy, yeah. And it's simply because if you think about it, what does a cow do when she eats grass? Ferments the grass in the stomach, fermenting the grass creates microbial protein which is available to produce milk protein. The problem with silage is it's already been fermented, and its capacity to produce protein in the gut is a lot less, so therefore you're going to get less milk protein. And I just think we could be in danger. I'm hoping that this is we've seen in other years where this could turn very quickly, and hopefully will. We could end up in situations where we could be playing around with diets on paper for the next few days, trying to get the exact balance right, when really what we should be doing is thinking, where can we go to graze? That would be the point.
So I suppose in summary, in the short term, given the circumstances that people are finding themselves in, feed the cows well, but be watching for the opportunity to get back out and get going as well, because you can't buy what's outside.
You can't buy what's outside. The high energy. If you had to buy it on what it's valued at the moment, you couldn't buy better feed than what's sitting outside. I fully take the point about how difficult it is to get out to graze it. I know exactly what it's like. Looked at it for long enough, but I just think even 3 or 4 hours. You think about that. Like you see what that diet looked like different, Stuart. Putting in an extra 2 kilos in the parlour and an extra 2 kilos of beet pulp or hulls, putting the cows out for 4 or 5 hours had the very same, if not a better effect on the quality of the diet. And remember, I'm with my nutrition hat on here. I'm not just putting cows out to grass because they should be out to grass. The reason we're doing it is to improve the quality of the diet and improve the plane of nutrition, taking all of those issues around ground conditions and getting grass into cows and all those things into account. Now, in the next few days, we might end up doing a bit of marking or maybe not grazing a couple of paddocks as well as we should. We'll get over that in the next round. So that's what I would say.
Okay, so everybody's joined us up here again, obviously, that has been speaking, and we've also been joined by Sean Kearney, who, as I said at the outset, is a dairy farmer just on the Limerick-Cork County bounds there, over near Kilbenny. So Sean, I suppose carrying on from what Joe has said there, just outline the situation on your own farm at the moment, and how is that impacting on your plan for breeding and so forth as well?
Yeah, well, Stuart, what I normally do is kind of break up the heifers and the cows and have 2 different regimes between both of them. And what I found this year is the maiden heifers going in were well behind target in weight for some reason. I don't know, I thought they got a fairly good do, but so the big thing was to bring them up to the breeding weight of 330 kilos, because I'm running a maintenance figure of about 10, which is about a 600 kilo cow is the type of cow that I want. So now, when their weight lasts, they're about 280 to 290, which would hopefully, if they get out, and I do get that bit of compensatory growth when the first month out in grass, if I do get them out in April, it seems to push them on a lot, and it kind of sets me up then for the heifers. And one other thing that wasn't mentioned that I do give the heifers, and I'm using sex semen with donkeys' ears, and I found that minerals are very important, so I do give them all the maiden heifers a bolus. And then I'll basically pick out my maiden heifer suitable to sex semen, and most of them, as long as they are improving in condition and everything, and they will get a sex semen. I'm nearly more worried about giving sex semen to an over fleshy heifer than one that is kind of, mightn't be the full 330 kilos, but you can see that they're thriving now.
Yeah, okay.
So then in the cows, what is kind of done in that I do always have a few cows that do pine away, that through maybe twins, I seem to get 6 or 7 sets of twins every year, so they're kind of put on once a day, which does help a lot. And I know Dennis, in his previous incarnation, he was our vet, he did do a bit of pre-scanning with us and things, and I do find that Metrocure product, like any cow that would have twins retained after birth or a late calf does get Metrocure, not too early. I think, Dennis, you said it at the time, that if a cow, that maybe about 3, I like to give it 3 weeks, have them calve 3 weeks before I give a Metrocure, and it does help big time in bringing them on heat.
Okay, very good. And I suppose just then from the conditions point of view, just so that people don't think that you're happy out floating away. You're literally floating away.
Far from it. Kind of in the cows, we got out any chance we got to get the cows out, which did help, and you'd see it in the protein figures, helped an awful lot. But they're in full time now at the past. They went out, I think, last Saturday for a small bit. They're in full time since. And what I did in conjunction with Ivan, who I sit down from below there, is giving a bit of maize meal there during the, mixing my ration with maize meal. So I'm feeding a 15% protein ration, and a third of that is maize meal. So I'm probably 10 or 12% protein. And I'm actually quite fairly surprised with condition in general of the cows. Silage was tested and is, I was lucky enough maybe in the end of May last year to make some good bales and things, and they seem to be milking away relatively good on it. Protein has taken a dip, of course, but that's the least of our worries, I think, now,
Okay, so effectively you're advocating what Joe was saying there, like you're in at the minute, but you're waiting for the opportunity. If the chance comes, you'll be gone again.
Yeah, like Joe was saying there is loads of grass, and even probably more on my farm than others, because I was forced to go in even much earlier than what I had to. What I did do and have found, I was always one for going out to fertiliser maybe too early, because our land doesn't, won't take off until you get heat. But what I gave about 15 units just to hold what grass I had. So I don't think I've grown any extra grass, but at least it's staying relatively green. There's not an awful lot of dirty butt in it and things,
Yeah, I suppose it's an important point. Mike Egan's work is showing that bit of early spread is important for the return from the next spread. So that's a good point. Okay, so look, I throw it open to questions from the floor. Ask away. I know you have plenty of experts up here in front of you to get your speak in. Please don't be shy. Yeah, Owen.
Is there any way of preventing slippage by using sex semen on cows and using the beef straws as well? We'll say you're going to have the 50% conception rate, so we're saying 100 cow herd you're going to be eyeing maybe 45 cows to get your 22 replacements. Then you're going to have those, half of them are going to repeat, and then you're going to lose maybe 4 or 5 days on the beef straws as well. And my second question then, is there any correlation between what the dam and the grand dam does of a bull? We'll say if the dam and the grand dam are doing 3.5 protein, and next thing you have a bull doing 0.22 protein, is there any, do we need to be picking dams that are doing the protein of 0.4 in order to get a 0.4 heifer, or is the genomics doing the business that will say grand dams and dams are doing 3.5 protein, but they're saying that the bull will be able to do a 4 protein?
So I'll ask you to answer the first question, Dennis, in relation to the slippage. We'll say trying to manage that, I suppose, on, is it? Minimise it, okay.
Minimise it, but it was more the gestation length of the beef bull that you were talking about, was it?
It's the two things.
Yeah.
It's your repeat level and your and then it's your slip as well. Should we be starting our AI a bit earlier?
Yeah, so start early, and I suppose the aim is to have the sex straws in as early as possible. So ideally in the first 2 weeks. And you mentioned doing all the cows, but certainly maybe using sex semen on the heifers means you're going to use less sex semen on the cows, which means you'll use your straws earlier, and you'll mitigate that slippage a bit as well, And I'm not obsessed with synchronization now by any means, but synchronization does, I suppose, the advantage of it from a slippage point of view is you actually get the sex semen straws in at the very start, so you're gaining time there as well. Yeah.
So do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I just think we need to be a little bit careful about the gestation in the first 6 weeks in the beef bulls, because a few fellas have said that to me this year, that it felt like they'd used all AI. And remember when we used to have a stock bull in, it was always said there was a lull at some point in the season after the first couple of weeks. The lull was that week where, the longer gestation beef cows carrying to the longer gestation beef bulls probably should have calved but didn't. They were a week later. So I just think we need to be careful with gestation length across all of the beef bulls used, not just the ones at the end. I know there's more scope to use something a bit longer, but it's an issue for them all, because a cow that is delayed by a week in February, she's delayed by a week in February, you're still losing milk on her.
Yeah.
You know, so we just, but that's maybe on a very extreme, on extreme ones possibly.
Okay, and then the second question, Fíona, I suppose, are the bulls that you're picking basically, so it's past performance, the guarantee of future performance is kind of what I was asking, and if there's a big leap in performance, and it's not backed up by the generations behind it, is it a false hope, I think is the question.
Yeah, so I suppose the milk production, it's one of the highest heritable traits within the overall EBI. So the dam and the grand dam will feed into the bull's performance, definitely. But what the genomics do and what the genetic valuations do is they adjust for the herd effect. So the nutrition on those herds that the female could be coming from, if it's exceptional, and they're really high producing, they could be feeding 2 ton of concentrates, and that's kind of inflating the dam's performance versus her actual genetics. So what the evaluations do is they adjust for the herd effect. So even though a dam might have done lower or might have done higher, it's always good to see the actual genetics of the sire and use that as the value. But people are definitely interested in the dam production, and we try to look at kind of average herd environments that the dams are performing really well in the herd environment when we are selecting our sires for the catalogue. And we even, like in the catalogue, if you are interested in the dam performance and grand dam, we publish it in the catalogues and up on the website as well. And in some of the video clips, we go through the dam performances then as well.
Okay, one more there. Dan?
Just there a question for Sean maybe. As regards, are you using sex semen in cows? And if you are, just to outline the secret behind it. And just on the CBV value for calves, like I know it's early days, but I think there should be a lot more emphasis placed on the age of the calf that's being presented, especially at marts, because there's no one really looking at the CBV at the moment. It's the age of the calf and it's the weight of the calf. If you sell calves in January, you get a double the price probably versus no, and that's down to the age of the calf and the weight of the calf probably more than anything else. And just maybe for our co-ops and that and the players and the whole lot of it, that if we're doing our jobs at home as regards vaccinating and presenting and rearing a good calf, maybe there's an opportunity there for a kind of a matchmaking of we'd say dairy farmers with good calves, well presented calves, and we'll say beef guys that are looking for good calves with good CBVs and well looked after. It's just maybe a point.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So, Sean, there was a question I was going to ask you. You've been using sex semen for a good number of years, ever before it became popular and early, like we said, so you have a lot of experience with it. You mentioned the bolus being an important piece from your perspective in terms of the actual usability of the product. What you're doing your own AI, maybe is that part of it, or are there things that you've learned from doing your own AI even as you've been going along?
When I say the first thing I'd say about sex semen is that the first time I got sex semen was imported from Holland and things, and I'd say it's a product that has definitely improved over the years in my experience anyway. Like even, is it going from the 2 million to the 4 million in it, and timing was never a thing that time, and now we just seem to be learning a bit more about it all the time. And as using it in cows, I've used it in cows, first, second, third, fourth, fifth lactation, whatever, but in what I've kind of learned is that I will no longer use it on first lactation. I know that because I feel that, in the first lactation they're still growing, they're milking, and as I know it might be fine, say 36-hour blocks, but I'll always come in some stage in April and early May even, where you get a very wet period and you're forced to strip graze until your first lactation animals are the ones that struggle on my farm. Anyway, that's what I feel. But if you have a cow, I'd only use it on cows second, third and fourth, and I'd like to see them on their third heat. And they're not, as I said, like those ones that have retained afterbirth or have given any sort of trouble. But definitely I'm getting as good a conception rate on the heifers with sex and as conventional, through trial and error, and I've had plenty of errors where it has been a disaster, you know, but now, like, I know often the first man to be blamed might be the eye man, but it's often that the animal is wrong, or, you know, that condition is the most important thing, and weather does have an effect. If you do, you know, if they have sun in their back, there's definitely a big help, and that's probably the same as sex and conventional, but there are the years that you do have a disaster, you can nearly pinpoint the problems, you know, or timing or whatever.
And do you give out much to the eye man when it does go wrong?
Well, I've no one myself to blame, and I have a father that does that anyways.
Rose, or Alan, do you want to pick up on the CBV question from Don there as well, in terms of, I suppose, Alan, just the age piece maybe?
Yeah, I suppose you hit the nail on the head there, and that's still what's being seen, is that, you know, as well as a high CBV, you want a bit of an age in the calf, which is 3 weeks is fine. I mean, as they always say, you know, a 3-week-old calf is twice the age of is 50% of extra of age than a 2-week-old calf, you know, and you're over probably a lot of the danger period there with some of the scours, you know, and that's the big worry really in a lot of farms. But the weight thing is really starting to come into vogue. I suppose till 2 years ago we didn't know what the weight was really, the calves. Only when Mark started putting it up on the board we suddenly became aware of the difference, you know. But it is, I suppose, look, CBV is going to be the tool that we'll use in time. It just hasn't, I suppose, really hit into vogue yet. I suppose if you want to sell calves at CBV, you're probably better off to try and sell them out of your own yard with it, you know, where you can print it off and explain to people, you know, show them your dairy beef profile or your dairy beef scorecard, should I say, how the calves you sold previously performed, show them the CBV of your calves, you know. It's basically, you're trying to give people a bit of confidence in what they're buying, and if you are asking for, I suppose, the higher end the prices for whatever calf, that they can say, right, I'll get it back hopefully in 2 years' time, you know.
Okay, Johnny, yeah.
Just in relation to minerals, just in relation to minerals in feed, like, are we confident enough that we don't have to put in? If we have a reasonable good fertility in our cows, that the meal, look, I'm getting from Dairygold at the moment, that they have enough of feed inside them. And I suppose just a comment, like, look, there's a lot of pressure out there at the moment in farmers, right? Like, we should have our maiden heifers out. I usually have the cows out day and night. They're inside at the moment, like, and heifers are not performing as good because, you know, if they're outside they get that kick and they're probably a bit behind in weight. So do we just wait and hope they make up the weight, or do we feed them a bit extra?
So I suppose the question there, John, is like, somebody mentioned, Sean mentioned the compensatory growth now, but if we start pushing them now again with feed inside, do we lose that compensatory growth when we do eventually get them turned out, is it? Yeah. Okay, Joel?
Yeah, on the heifer one first, I suppose, the window for compensatory growth is closing really, isn't it? Many weeks have we left? I don't think we should be thinking about compensatory growth too much on heifers at all, so I would think it's a very good point, probably should have mentioned it, prop them up if they need to be. And look, for a heifer that size, you know, 320, 330 kilo heifer, it doesn't take much extra feed to make the difference. You know, we've seen this over the years, you know, maybe with poor quality silage, even something like a quarter of a kilo of soya between 4 heifers can be the difference in keeping growing and not growing. So the good thing about a small animal is it doesn't take that much extra to keep them right, so it's probably worth doing. On the minerals one, I think, yeah, look, I would say the reason we talk about minerals, I suppose 80% of the queries or 90% of the queries we get about fertility are blaming minerals, and it's probably responsible for 10% of the actual problems. But if it's a problem for you, you need to fix it. So I would think, you know, the one we've seen over the last couple of years was that phosphorus issue, and we know what phosphorus deficiency looks like on farm at this stage, but that's a big, you know, that needs to be fixed if it's a problem on that individual herd. I would say in most cases, if we look at the rations that are put together, they're put together with breeding in mind, so they have a trace element pack in them, and they also have, you know, they would have added phosphorus in them too, so they should be fine. But if it's a worry or a concern, or you've seen it in the past, it's no harm. Look at 2 weeks before breeding, and you might only have to take, what would you say, Dennis, 7 or 8% of the herd. Even if you have 100 cows, if you blood sample 6 or 7 cows a couple of weeks before breeding, it's going to tell you what you need to know. All right, and it's as simple as that. I mean, we don't have to overcomplicate these things. I just don't want people thinking that, you know, I'm going to maybe not focus on body condition, not focus on having enough grass in front of them, not focus on picking for high fertility genetics and thinking that a bolus or something is going to solve the problems. It just won't, like, because it's probably not the problem in the first place.
I think there's worth doing a bit of investigation, Joe. You know, it's not a huge deal to do maybe some forage analysis, whether it is grass or silage, and some bloods, because what you don't want to be doing is throwing minerals in if they're already sufficient, because you have deficiency, but you could have you can go the other direction as well.
On one solution, pick one.
Yeah.
I just make the point. Just pick one exactly. Like pick one solution. Pick one option to supplement them. You know, there's no point in throwing it into the meal and then throwing it in other things and doing all that. So yeah. So if you're going to do it, look, we would have seen it over the years that if there's an issue with something like phosphorus, it'll be there 2 weeks before breeding. But if you fix it a couple of weeks before breeding, it'll be fixed very quickly. Like I always say it this way: big minerals, big problems. You know, if you think of it that way. So magnesium, if that's a problem, you're going to have tetany. If calcium is a problem, you're going to have milk fever. If phosphorus is a problem, you're going to have problems too. So the macro minerals, big problems, but you'll fix them in a couple of days by fixing them properly. Where your trace minerals, the stuff that we all get, it gets very complicated around those, doesn't it? Like copper and copper and iodine, selenium and zinc, and all the interactions. Those are more gradual problems. You'll see them. You know, it takes time to fix those. So I would be thinking with minerals, get it right. If you have to investigate, as you say, Dennis, do it, but then move on. Body condition is the thing I'd be most worried about at the moment, to be fair.
Okay, there's 3 questions, so we'll take this lad here.
Well, I suppose I have 2-part question. I suppose first, we'll say for the average 100 cow man that wants to use genomic sires, what's recommended the size of the bull team? So that's the first part.
Okay. So do you want to take that, Fíona?
For 100 cows, we'd probably be saying about 7 bulls. 7 or 8, yeah.
Okay. Well, given that, do you think the way genomics is going and we have to use a higher bull selection team, is one AI company able to supply 7 bulls fit for service with a reasonable high level of pickiness?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. No, honestly though, like we probably have we probably have the largest selection of sires. It just depends on your system. What are you wanting to focus on? We do have a massive selection of sires depending on the systems. So, and I suppose within Munster we cater for so many systems as well. So I would be surprised if we couldn't fill your specifications.
Okay, just to follow on from this man's point, I suppose when we're using genomics, it's a gamble. So if we can remove some of that gamble by using a mother that is proven doing 9% solids, has a reasonable high health subindex, stuff like that, why can't we look at that more and not ignore it? Because some of the bulls could be genomic on a genomic sire if we can rule out one section of gamble by using a proven mother. Is that not something that could be looked at more?
Yeah, so I suppose like a proven mother, when she's completed her first lactation, we'd have a good gauge of her production. But saying that her production as a first lactation female is going to be lower than, say, third lactation. Genomic bulls, I wouldn't be against using genomic bulls because they are the highest genetic merit that you have available to them. Now, if you wanted to increase your security, you could use a genomic sire from a daughter-proven bull, and that would increase the reliability that bit more. So it just depends. But then again, it takes about 5 to 7 years for a bull to be daughter-proven. So if you want to use daughter-proven sires, that's completely your own preference. But those genetics are 5 or 7 years older than the newest genetics out there. And we're constantly trying to improve and increase the genetic merit of the sires and the national herd. So it's really a preference. But your daughter-proven sires are that bit older, so they tend to have a lower genetic merit. But I wouldn't be against certainly using genomic sires from a daughter-proven sire. And a lot of our sires are producing sons as well that are going into AI, so it should give you that bit more confidence as well.
I suppose the other thing is that daughter-proven, as it was many years ago, isn't daughter-proven now. Like it's the reliability level is only a couple of % in the difference, really. Like, so yeah. Don't get hung up on the daughter-proof piece with necessarily.
like I'm a big fan of genomics and I use a lot of genomics, but what I'm saying is genomics, there's going to be a gamble and you accept that by using it, but can you take some of that gamble out by, as sense, using a mother that is daughter proven? So basically, if that mother has 4 or 5 lactations and she's constantly hitting 9% solids, and she...
Then you're not gambling with the sire that you're using. But the way to avoid the gamble is to spread. Have enough bulls. That's
but to try and find that criteria that fit all those criteria, and then look at the mothers and say, I want them doing 9% solids, calving in February, you know, you're gonna dwindle down your list fairly quick, and that's my first point. Can one AI company service that list?
Okay. Yeah, so I suppose it's just important to point out that the genetic capacity in an animal, I know you're saying about the February calf, or no matter when they calve, that's their genetic capacity. So if they've bred a bull that was born the 1st of April, okay, as long as he's fit for service and so forth, he's going to deliver in terms of his genetics. So don't worry about it from that point of view. I'll move on. So Jerome had a question down there at the back. We'll take one more question then after that from Pat again, and Martin, you're going to close it for us. Okay, you're all right, Jerome, okay. Go ahead.
2 questions. The CBV there, is that a reflection of the beef animal's performance from time a dairy farmer sells the calf onto a beef farm, whether the calf is sold once or twice or 3 times through the mart? Is that a reflection of his carcass weight at slaughter, and can we assess that on the ICBF? And more importantly, as dairy farmers, we actually have no control over how that animal is treated from the time it leaves our farm, relative, so from the point of view of its performance. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, so Alan, you made that point in your presentation that looking at the beef scorecard, you can't influence the level of management on the farm that you sell onto, but it is a good indication of the type of stock that you have in them.
There's one thing you could probably gauge in it, right? If you look at the age or slaughtered at and look at the slaughter weight, it'll kind of give you an idea of what system the farmer followed or what they did. You know, if you see a 340 carcass at 23 months, you know, you'll say, right, that's a good calf and a guy did a good job. If you see a 300 kilo carcass at 29 months, you say, right, okay, maybe there's an extensive farmer or there was a bad job done or something along the way. It's hard to know. But, you know, if you see a good performance at the right age, you'd say, right, you're on the money.
A lot of farmers, myself included, we're all at a crossroads. We're dealing with derogation, we're dealing with bending, we're dealing with less nitrogen, we're allowed less spec fertilizer to grow grass. So our ability to grow tons of grass has been reduced by probably 2, 3, maybe 4 ton in places. Against that backdrop then, where will we go from the point of view if you have maybe 100 cows stocked at the 220 going forward? What are our options to continue to have a decent standard of income against those backdrops? Like, where should we be going from the point of view of yield? Should we drive on our yield per cow, or are we just going to have to reduce those cows? Like in my situation, I'll have to drop 23 cows, and that's 23 cows off the top. Everyone else has to be paid before I get my bit. And it's against that backdrop, farmers are putting out this thing like flies, lads. I'd be very concerned about it.
Joe, do you want to take that one?
I thought we were supposed to be ending the meeting. We'll be back here. Great. Look, it's a fair question, and you can really feel it this spring. As the weather hasn't helped at all to sort of, people are just getting used to a lot of these changes, and then you're saying this is just compounding the misery, I would call it, and I fully take that on. We have been driving on our yield for 20 years, right? I think we have to remember that if we go back to, if we were having this meeting 20 years ago, the average in Dairygold was about 330 kilos of milk solids. I know you could say quota was partly the reason for that, but the genetics in the herd and the management of the herd, the standard of management and grazing management, all those things have improved. So, I was looking back actually, Stuart, on quite recently on when quotas went, the highest 10% of herds in Dairygold were doing about 465 of solids. And if you're doing 465 kilos of solids now, you think it's fairly average, if you know what I'm saying. So we have made a massive progress in productivity using the EBI. So I think we have to be careful that we don't say that because something like a change from 250 to 220 means that suddenly we have to tear up all of what we've done with breeding and change tack on that. I think that would be a mistake, to be honest. Cost of production is obviously a massive issue, and if you look at what's in the index as it stands currently, the capacity to calve at the right time, have the health traits driven on, maintenance values, which obviously caused a huge storm on the beef side of things when we looked at how like maintenance on beef is really about the cost of keeping the animal. Like what we have here is a cost index with also production in it as well. Like EBI is the best bet we have, even in the change of circumstances, to keep a cow that addresses all those issues. So I wouldn't be changing the direction at all, or saying now we need to be going for very high levels of milk production just simply because of that. Because to do that would ignore the biggest issue that we have, and the biggest issue we have in farms is actually cost of production. Okay, we've seen in other jurisdictions and our next door neighbours possibly, and people not so far away, that have driven just on a yield basis, and their solids don't move as a result of that, and the cost of production go up, and their margins haven't improved by any means. So be careful on that one. I think we haven't the time, I suppose, to get into the whole question of the direction because of 220 and all that. Sure, to be fair to everyone that's thinking about the sandwiches, and I'm not parking the discussion, but we do intend to do an awful lot of that around that with groups at the moment. I think I'll just make one comment on it, possibly to leave it at it. I do believe that on some farms the reaction to the possible change is actually going to cause more problem than the actual change. I do think people are making odd decisions around this, trying to avoid what they think is going to happen to their farm, and I think the cost element of that can get out of hand a little bit, and we're seeing that in terms of what people are paying for land, that it'll never return what they're thinking it's going to return. So we have to be careful on a one-by-one basis to say, you know, which is worse, the change that's coming or our reaction to it. You know, but we are open, and I'm not dismissing the question, we're open to discuss that on an individual basis with anyone, and we get it, but it's hard to have them discussions of what for an individual, you know, in this setting, but certainly we should be looking at it one by one, and a full farm plan is needed to really answer those in detail, I would say.
I'm back again, Joe.
Yeah, if I could just, could I ask you to maybe, when you do address the question, that maybe you put up a kind of a chart or to where the axis would meet or where the axis would cross, if you know what I'm saying.
It's a fair question. Look, what we are seeing, right, and just to be fair on this, and it's not for every farm, because we have to look at where people are starting from, but we have seen in a lot of cases where people are, the 20 cows you're talking about, on some farms, not on your farm, but in a lot of cases, they are bringing a lot of cost with them, right? To begin with, to have them there in the first place. There's not that many farms that we're talking to, particularly now with changes in nitrogen application rates, that are growing the type of grass they would need to grow to feed the herd fully on grass at the stocking rates we used to have. Okay, so like it's not uncommon for us to maybe cost out some of these extra cows, and they're costing well over $2,000 to keep for the year. So while there is a loss in output, and there's a loss in milk, we have to make the decisions of what we need to do based on what does it mean for the changes in our costs as well. And I'm seeing it on some farms, not everybody, but in some farms where, you know, 5 or 10% is not the worst thing that ever happened on the cutback. But on the other hand, we have to say this too, that for maybe somebody at a different point in their growth phase, extra cows on their farm might be what's important. So like some farmers would benefit from taking out 10%, and other farmers would benefit from having 10% extra. Okay, and that's the reality. And we've been quoted and possibly misquoted at times saying, Teagasc said, oh, a cut is a good thing or a cut is a bad thing. It entirely depends where you're starting from. And tell me that we don't know somebody that has 10 cows too many, Stuart. And then we also see maybe people at a different phase of their career that a bit of extra output is going to help them develop or whatever it might be. So it's very, very individual. So we have to be very careful on these headline statements. But all I'd say is, don't just look at the loss in output. Look at the change it would have on your costs. And chasing after those can be very, very expensive. You know.
Okay, Sean, yeah.
Just one quick one there. Is the joint programme initiative there? Look, there's lots of dates coming up there, and Dairygold have 8 or 10 monitor farms there that will be involved in that. And a lot of what has been discussed around that question will be discussed and at them discussion group meetings. And look, keep an eye out for the dates. They'll be very well attended, and you get a lot out of them. Thank you.
Yeah, and Joe just made the point there. There's a farm walk on in Moore Park next Wednesday at 11 o'clock that you're all welcome to attend, and we'll be trying to address some of your concerns as you raised there, Pat, in relation to growing grass with less fertiliser, and obviously the reliance on clover as well. So look, we have to wrap it up because the sandwiches are out now on the table. So Martin, you're going to close it for us. Sum it all up, so.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I'm going to close it very, very quickly because the smell of the sausages is getting to me as well. The one thing, the message I'm picking up here is the rate of change, and I think in fairness to you out there at the spring we're having, everything that's coming down the tracks in the last couple of years, it's the speed of it, and being able to adapt to that is an enormous challenge. And the comments being made about sex semen and so on, it's a real disruptive technology. CBV, all this information, all this data is potentially disruptive. And what we find even with the sex semen piece, to forecast that, we're producing it from last year. We have to stop producing it this week. We have 30 days of that in quarantine. So we have to have a crystal ball when we're trying to deal with sex semen. So all these issues are challenges for different aspects of the industry and challenges for yourselves. The one thing I learned today is a lot of this is about planning, and people have talked about planning. And the one thing about bringing the organisations together, if we Munster Bovine, Dairygold, Teagasc and some of the industry partners and ICBF included, it means that we can effectively plan and use the services to help you do that. We're not expecting you to go out there and do that on your own. You're not on your own with it, because it is difficult and there's a maze of stuff to go through. So we need to recognise that, and if we're to move forward in the next 4 or 5 years and go with all these technologies, we need to help each other on this one. So that's the piece I'm picking up from it. I mean, I think the right bulls, right cows, preparing the cow right, all those pieces are coming out here. And that's down to the very practical stuff we can do in the next month. And this next month is going to be critical to that first service conception rate outcome, and certainly the success of sexed. We will have farms will tank on occasions with this, and those are particular farm effects, but again, we will do our best to avoid that with as much information as possible. I think Fíona and Rose are bringing out keep it simple. Alan is giving very, very straightforward, good, practical advice. Again, keep it straightforward, and if we're building those relationships in the future between beef and dairy, I think there's a model there that we can work on. So look, there's a small bit of housekeeping here. There's a draw, so whoever's left has an opportunity to win. We should confine it to people who are left in the room. So I need to pick out. Here's Paul, a beautiful assistant. Pick out a name. That is James Magner. He's getting the €100 Munster Bovine voucher. Pat O'Donovan.
That's for asking all the questions.
That's for asking all the questions. He's getting a Dairygold €50 voucher, right? It says something about Munster Bovine anyway. Justin Hennessy, another €50 voucher from Dairygold, and another one there, Paul. And that's from Owen. Can't make out the name here now. Have a look at that.
Because with an R anyway.
Try it.
Rohan. It's an 085 mobile number.
Oh, he's going to get real pissed off if we go again, lads.
And it's an EOGHAN. He might be going out for the sausages.
All right, okay. We will hold it for him. Okay. So the last thing I want to do, lads. Look, hopefully the weather will turn. It always does. Fingers crossed, right? And I understand, and we understand the pressure that's here. And one thing about the panel we have, it's practical. They have empathy for the situation, and they do have a realization of the reality of it. So I want to thank Joe and Dennis, Fíona, Rose, Sean for telling us his own situation, and Alan, and especially Stuart for keeping the meeting together, and also for all the work that's been done by the Dairygold team, the Munster Bovine team and the Teagasc team to pull this together, and hopefully we'll run these events in the future as successfully. So thank you very much.